The interview letter crumpled in Ethan Cole's trembling hand as he stared at the woman stranded on the empty highway, her designer heels sinking into gravel, her expensive car smoking under the merciless sun. His watch read 8:47 a.m. The interview, his last chance, his only chance, started at 9:15. 28 minutes to cross a city drowning in morning traffic. 28 minutes between everything and nothing. His daughter's face flashed in his mind, her bright eyes trusting him to fix their broken world. The woman looked up, fear raw in her expression, alone and vulnerable. In that suspended moment, Ethan understood with crushing clarity that whatever choice he made would define not just his day, but his entire future. The engine idled. Time didn't stop, but his entire world balanced on the edge of a single decision. Before we dive into this story of sacrifice, redemption, and the unexpected ways compassion reshapes our lives, I want to invite you to join me on this journey. Stay with me until the very end. You won't regret it. And please, drop a comment below telling me what city you're watching from. I love seeing how far these stories travel and connecting with all of you around the world. Now, hit that like button and let's begin. The apartment smelled like burnt toast and broken promises. Ethan Cole stood in the narrow kitchen of the two-bedroom walk-up he could barely afford, watching his daughter Ava drag her spoon through a bowl of generic cornflakes. Morning sunlight struggled through the grimy window, casting pale shadows across furniture that had seen better decades. The refrigerator hummed its irregular rhythm, a sound he'd grown so accustomed to that silence would have seemed strange. "Daddy, your tie is crooked," Ava said, her 6-year-old voice carrying that particular certainty children possess about things that matter. Ethan glanced down at the navy tie, his only decent tie, and realized she was right. His fingers fumbled with the knot, muscle memory from years in corporate environments now rusty from disuse. How long had it been since he'd worn professional clothes? 8 months. 8 months since the layoffs at Morrison Engineering, since his world had tilted sideways and refused to right itself. "Better?" he asked, crouching beside her chair. Ava reached out with small, sticky fingers and adjusted the knot with surprising precision. "Now it's perfect. You look really handsome, Daddy, like a businessman in the movies." Something tightened in Ethan's chest. "Thank you, sweetheart. That means everything to me. Are you nervous?" She studied his face with eyes too perceptive for someone who still believed in the tooth fairy. "A little," he admitted. Lying to Ava had never come naturally to him, even about small things. But nervous is okay. It means something matters. "Mrs. Patterson says butterflies in your tummy mean you're going to do something important." Ava scooped another spoonful of cereal. "I get them before show and tell." Ethan smiled, though his stomach felt less like butterflies and more like a clenched fist. "Mrs. Patterson is a smart lady. Speaking of which, Grandma's going to pick you up after school today, remember? I might be home late." "Because of the interview?" "Because of the interview." Ava nodded solemnly, then brightened. "If you get the job, can we go to the pizza place? The one with the games?" The pizza place cost $40 for a decent meal. $40 he didn't have, not with rent due in 9 days, and his checking account bleeding red. But looking at Ava's hopeful face, her absolute faith that her father could accomplish anything, Ethan heard himself say, "If I get this job, we'll go to the pizza place. I promise." "Pinky promise?" He linked his little finger with hers. "Pinky promise." The weight of that promise settled onto the pile of other promises. Keep the lights on. Keep food in the refrigerator. Keep Ava in the same school with her friends. Keep pretending everything would somehow work out. The structural engineering position at Meridian Construction represented more than just income. It represented survival, dignity, a future that extended beyond next month's bills. "I should get going," Ethan said, straightening up. "Mrs. Chen is expecting you at 7:30. I know. Ava slurped the last of her milk. "Daddy? Yeah, baby? You're going to do great. I just know it." Ethan kissed the top of her head, breathing in the strawberry scent of her shampoo. "I love you more than all the stars in the sky." "I love you more than all the pizza in the world," she countered, their familiar exchange. He grabbed his worn leather portfolio, a gift from his ex-wife back when they'd both believed in different futures, and headed for the door. The resume inside represented hours of agonizing revisions. Each word chosen to convince strangers that an 8-month gap didn't mean he'd forgotten how to calculate load-bearing capacities or read structural blueprints. The morning air hit him with unexpected coolness, a reminder that autumn was creeping into the city. Ethan's 12-year-old Honda sat in its designated spot, faded blue paint and a passenger door that only opened from the inside. The engine turned over on the second try, and he whispered a small prayer of gratitude to whatever mechanical gods governed aging vehicles. Traffic moved sluggishly through the neighborhood, a familiar dance of brake lights and frustration. Ethan merged onto the expressway, checking his watch obsessively. 8:17. The Meridian Construction headquarters sat on the other side of the city, a 40-minute drive under ideal conditions. He'd left himself a comfortable buffer, determined that nothing would derail this opportunity. The interview had taken 3 weeks to arrange. 3 weeks of phone screenings, reference checks, and carefully worded emails from hiring coordinators who held his future in their bureaucratic hands. The position itself seemed almost too perfect. Senior structural engineer, competitive salary, benefits that included health insurance and a retirement plan. Things he'd taken for granted in his previous life, before the layoffs, before Sarah had left him citing financial instability and broken promises, before he'd learned exactly how thin the line was between middle-class comfort and one disaster away from catastrophe. His phone buzzed in the cup holder. A text from his mother. "Good luck today, honey. You've got this. Praying for you." Ethan smiled despite himself. Margaret Cole's faith in her son remained unshakable, even when his own faith wavered. She'd been furious when Sarah left, had called her former daughter-in-law several names that would have scandalized her church friends. Now she watched Ava 2 evenings a week, refusing payment despite her own limited retirement income, insisting that family helped family. The expressway opened up briefly, and Ethan pressed the accelerator, the Honda's engine whining in protest. Morning sunlight glinted off downtown skyscrapers in the distance, symbols of corporate power and professional success that felt simultaneously close and impossibly far away. 8:32. Still on schedule. Ethan allowed himself to imagine what success might look like. A steady paycheck, first and foremost. The ability to buy groceries without calculating every item, to replace Ava's shoes when they wore out instead of stuffing cardboard in the soles. Maybe, eventually, a better apartment in a better neighborhood with a better school district. Small dreams, really, but they'd grown enormous in their scarcity. The radio played some forgettable pop song, and Ethan found his mind wandering to the interview itself. He'd researched Meridian Construction exhaustively, memorizing their recent projects, their company philosophy, their emphasis on sustainable building practices. He'd prepared answers to standard questions, practiced describing his professional strengths without sounding arrogant, rehearsed how to address the employment gap without seeming defensive or desperate. Because he was desperate. Desperation had a particular taste, metallic and bitter, something that lived in the back of his throat during sleepless 3 a.m. hours when bills arrived faster than solutions. The construction jobs he'd been picking up, day labor mostly, through a temp agency that took 30% off the top, paid enough to delay catastrophe but not prevent it. He'd lost 12 pounds he couldn't afford to lose, developed calluses that wouldn't have existed in his previous life of blueprints and project meetings, learned to stretch $1 until it screamed. Ava deserved better. Deserved the father who'd existed before the layoffs, the one who could afford birthday parties and dance classes, and didn't have to comparison shop for cereal. 8:41. Ethan changed lanes, navigating around a semi-truck that seemed to be moving through molasses. The downtown exits approached, familiar territory from his old commute. Strange how quickly the professional world became foreign once you were outside it, looking in through glass windows at people who still belonged. The highway curved and suddenly traffic bunched up, brake lights flashing in a synchronized warning. Ethan swore softly, craning his neck to see the cause. Nothing visible. Probably just the usual bottleneck where 2 expressways merged. He drummed his fingers against the steering wheel, watching precious minutes evaporate. 8:46. Still okay. Still manageable. Traffic crept forward, then stopped entirely. Ethan checked the GPS on his phone, which helpfully informed him that he'd arrive at 9:12, 3 minutes before his scheduled interview. 3 minutes to find parking, navigate an unfamiliar building, locate the correct floor and office, and arrive looking calm and professional rather than frazzled and desperate. His heart rate climbed. The car in front of him, a pristine Mercedes with dealer plates, hadn't moved in 90 seconds. "Come on," Ethan muttered. "Come on, come on, come on." 850. The traffic finally began moving again, a grudging acceleration that felt like freedom. Ethan pressed forward, changing lanes aggressively, earning honks from drivers who probably weren't racing toward their last chance at financial stability. The downtown exit approached. Ethan signaled, merged, and suddenly he was off the expressway, navigating surface streets that should have been familiar but felt alien in his heightened state of anxiety. The GPS recalculated 9:14 arrival time, 1 minute late. Potentially forgivable if he called ahead, if he had a good excuse, if the hiring manager was feeling generous. Ethan grabbed his phone, scrolling for the number, when movement ahead caught his attention. A car sat on the shoulder of a 4-lane road that cut through an industrial area, empty warehouses and fenced lots, the kind of neighborhood that didn't see much foot traffic. The car was expensive, sleek lines and glossy paint that suggested a price tag Ethan couldn't fathom. Its hood was raised, steam or smoke rising into the morning air, and beside it stood a young woman. Even from a distance, Ethan could see she didn't belong in this setting. Her clothes spoke of boardrooms and power lunches, a tailored dress and heels that were beautiful but completely impractical for a roadside breakdown. She had her phone to her ear, but her body language screamed frustration and fear, pacing, gesturing, looking around at the empty industrial landscape like someone suddenly realizing exactly how alone they were. Ethan's foot eased off the accelerator. His watch read 8:52. Traffic flowed smoothly now, the downtown area just 15 minutes away. He could make it. Probably, if nothing else went wrong. The woman lowered her phone, staring at it with an expression Ethan recognized, the particular despair of technology failing when you needed it most. She looked up and down the empty road. No other cars had slowed. No one else seemed to notice or care that a woman in expensive clothes was stranded in an increasingly questionable neighborhood. Ethan's Honda carried him closer. He could see her face now, probably late 20s, early 30s, with dark hair pulled into a professional style that was starting to come undone in the light breeze. She looked scared. Not panicked, but definitely frightened, the kind of fear that came from being vulnerable and visible and completely out of your depth. The interview materials sat in the portfolio on his passenger seat. 28 minutes until his appointment. 28 minutes to cross the remaining distance, park, and present himself as the solution to Meridian Construction's structural engineering needs. Ethan's hands tightened on the steering wheel. Someone else would stop. This was a major road, even if it was temporarily empty. Someone with more time, more resources, more ability to help would come along. He had responsibilities. He had a daughter depending on him. He had an interview that represented the difference between survival and drowning. He drove past. Made it maybe 50 yards before his foot hit the brake. Ethan sat there, idling in the right lane, staring at the road ahead. His reflection in the rearview mirror showed a man he didn't entirely recognize. Tension around the eyes, the desperate calculation of someone who'd learned to measure everything against survival. When had he become this person? When had fear made him small? Ava's voice echoed in his memory. "You look really handsome, Daddy, like a businessman in the movies." What kind of businessman drove past someone in trouble? What kind of father taught his daughter through action and inaction that self-interest trumped compassion when the stakes were high? "Damn it," Ethan whispered. He checked his mirrors, threw the car in reverse, and backed up along the shoulder. The woman watched his approach with obvious wariness, stepping slightly away from the road. Smart, cautious, exactly what she should do when a strange man in a beat-up Honda approached her isolated position. Ethan pulled up behind her disabled vehicle and put the car in park. Through his windshield, he could see her more clearly now, younger than he'd initially thought, maybe 28 or 29, with features that suggested she was more accustomed to giving orders than receiving help. Her dress probably cost more than his monthly rent. The car, he recognized the badge now, some high-end European model, represented a world where roadside breakdowns meant inconvenience rather than catastrophe. He stepped out of the Honda, making his movements deliberately slow and non-threatening. "Hey, I'm sorry to startle you. I saw you were having car trouble. Do you need help?" The woman studied him with sharp eyes that cataloged everything: his suit, his car, his general appearance of someone trying very hard to look more successful than circumstances suggested. Her hand stayed near her purse, probably within reach of pepper spray or something similar. "I've called for a tow truck," she said, her voice carrying the particular accent of expensive education. "They said 45 minutes. Maybe an hour." Ethan glanced at his watch. 8:56. "Can I take a look? I'm not a mechanic, but I know a few things about engines." "You really don't have to." "I know, but you're alone on a pretty empty stretch of road in a neighborhood that's not exactly welcoming, and I'm already here." He gestured toward her car. 5 minutes. If I can't figure it out, at least you'll have company until the tow truck arrives." She hesitated, clearly weighing the risks of accepting help from a stranger against the reality of her situation. Finally, she nodded. "Okay, thank you. I'm Olivia." "Ethan." He moved toward her car, peering at the engine. Steam rose from what looked like a ruptured coolant hose, the kind of problem that would leave the car undrivable but was potentially fixable with basic tools and supplies. Olivia joined him, keeping a careful distance. "I have no idea what happened. I was driving normally, and suddenly the temperature gauge spiked, and there was this smell." "Coolant hose," Ethan said, pointing. "See that? It's split. Probably age and pressure. The good news is it's not catastrophic. The bad news is your car's not going anywhere without a replacement. So I'm stuck waiting for the tow truck." Ethan pulled out his phone, checking the time again. 8:58. A crazy idea formed, the kind of idea that would absolutely seal his fate regarding the interview, but might actually help this stranded stranger. "There's an auto parts store about a mile from here," he said slowly. "I could grab a replacement hose, come back, and probably have you running in 20 minutes. It's a pretty straightforward fix." Olivia's eyebrows rose. "You would do that? For a complete stranger?" "It's a mile," Ethan said, not quite answering the question. "And you look like you have somewhere important to be." "I do, actually. A board meeting at 10. It's critical." She paused. "But don't you have somewhere to be? You're dressed for something professional." 900 thoughts crashed through Ethan's mind simultaneously. The interview, Ava's face, the promise of pizza, his dwindling bank account, the cosmic unfairness of this situation, the simple fact that Olivia was a person in trouble and he had the ability to help. "I have an interview," he heard himself say. "But it can wait a few more minutes. Let me grab that hose." The lie tasted wrong, but the alternative, explaining that he was actively choosing to miss his last chance at salvation, seemed worse. Olivia didn't need to carry that weight. Ethan climbed back into his Honda and pulled up the GPS for the nearest auto parts store. 9:01. If he drove fast, grabbed the part, and got lucky with the repair, he might still make it by 9:30. Late, but potentially forgivable with a good explanation. The auto parts store materialized exactly where the GPS promised. A squat building with oil-stained parking and hand-painted signs advertising deals on brake pads. Ethan jogged inside, finding the coolant hose section with the help of a bored teenager wearing a name tag that read Kyle. "I need a coolant hose," Ethan said, describing the car model. Kyle disappeared into the back, returning with two options. "This one's aftermarket, $12. This one's OEM, $47. Ethan reached for his wallet, mentally calculating. $47. Almost exactly what he had until payday, earmarked for groceries and gas. But the cheaper hose might not fit right, might create more problems. "The OEM, he said, handing over his credit card and silently praying it wouldn't be declined. The transaction went through. Ethan grabbed the part and sprinted back to his car, checking his phone. 9:13. The interview started in 2 minutes, and he was miles away, holding a coolant hose for a stranger's expensive car. What was he doing? What insane calculation had led him to this moment? But even as panic clawed at his chest, Ethan drove back toward Olivia's car. Because somewhere in the maze of fear and desperation, a small voice reminded him that some things mattered more than survival. Some choices defined who you were, not just what you had. Olivia stood exactly where he'd left her, relief obvious on her face when his Honda appeared. Ethan parked and grabbed the hose, along with basic tools from his trunk. "You came back," she said, something vulnerable in her voice. "I said I would." Ethan knelt beside the engine. "This should only take a few minutes." His hands worked automatically, muscle memory from years of fixing things that broke because new versions were unaffordable. The damaged hose came off easily. The replacement slid into place with satisfying precision. Ethan tightened the clamps, checked the connections, and straightened up. "You'll need to add coolant before you drive anywhere," he said. "There's a gas station 3 blocks that way. Top it off, let the engine cool for a few more minutes, and you should be fine." Olivia stared at him like he'd performed magic. "I don't know what to say. You saved me, completely saved me. Just helped with a car problem." Ethan wiped his hands on a rag from his trunk, acutely aware of the grease now staining his sleeve. His interview suit, his only decent suit, now marked with evidence of roadside repairs. "How much do I owe you?" Olivia reached for her purse. "The part, your time. Don't worry about it. Please, you've gone completely out of your way." 9:26. The interview had started 11 minutes ago. Somewhere across the city, a hiring manager was probably checking their watch, wondering if Ethan Cole was another no-show, another candidate who didn't respect other people's time. "Seriously, it's fine," Ethan said. "Just pay it forward sometime." Olivia pulled out a business card, pressing it into his hand. "At least take this. If you ever need anything at all, please call me. I mean that." Ethan glanced at the card. Embossed lettering, heavy stock, the kind of business card that announced importance. Olivia Hayes, CEO, Hayes and Associates. A downtown address that placed her office in the most expensive real estate in the city. "You're a CEO?" The words came out before he could stop them. "Family business," Olivia said with a slight smile. "Commercial real estate development, which makes my complete inability to fix a car even more embarrassing. Different skill sets." Ethan pocketed the card, knowing he'd never use it. People like Olivia Hayes didn't actually mean, "Call me anytime." It was just something successful people said to feel generous. "Thank you, Ethan. Truly, you have no idea what this means to me." He nodded, climbing back into his Honda before emotion could crack through his careful composure. The engine started and Ethan pulled away, watching Olivia in his rearview mirror as she walked toward the gas station, no longer stranded, no longer afraid. 9:29. Ethan grabbed his phone, found the number for Meridian Construction, and dialed with shaking hands. "Meridian Construction, how may I direct your call?" "Hi, this is Ethan Cole. I had a 9:15 interview, and I'm running late. There was an emergency. Please hold." Terrible hold music filled his ear. Ethan navigated through traffic, his heart hammering against his ribs. Maybe they'd understand. Maybe emergency qualified as legitimate excuse. "Mr. Cole?" A different voice, male, with the particular flatness of someone delivering bad news. "This is Derek Morrison from HR. We waited until 9:30, but I'm afraid we've moved forward with other candidates. I'm literally 10 minutes away. There was a situation. We had 5 qualified candidates scheduled today, Mr. Cole. Punctuality is part of professionalism. I'm sorry, but the position is no longer available to you." The line went dead. Ethan sat at a red light, phone still pressed to his ear, the full weight of his decision settling onto his shoulders like physical mass. He'd sacrificed his interview, his last, best chance at stability, for a stranger who probably wouldn't remember his name in a week. The light turned green. Someone honked behind him. Ethan drove forward mechanically, no longer certain where he was going or why. His phone rang. His mother. "How did it go?" Margaret's voice bubbled with hope. "Tell me everything." Ethan couldn't speak, couldn't form words around the enormity of what he'd just lost. "Honey, are you there? Ethan?" "I didn't make it to the interview," he finally managed. "I was helping someone, and I didn't make it." Silence on the other end, heavy with disappointment and confusion. "I have to go, Mom. I'll call you later." He ended the call before she could respond, before her inevitable questions could force him to explain the inexplicable. What rational person sacrificed their future for a stranger? What kind of father prioritized compassion over his daughter's security? Ethan found himself at a familiar location without conscious navigation, the offices of Rapid Labor Solutions, the temp agency that had kept him marginally employed for the past 8 months. A small storefront operation run by a man named Jerry who smelled like cigars and operated on the fundamental principle that desperate people had limited options. The bell above the door chimed as Ethan entered. Jerry looked up from behind a desk covered in paperwork and coffee stains, his expression shifting from neutral to sympathetic. "Ethan, wasn't expecting you today. Thought you had that big interview." "Didn't work out." Ethan's voice sounded distant, like it belonged to someone else. "You got any work today?" Jerry studied him for a long moment, seeing things Ethan probably didn't want visible. Construction site on the east side. Day rate, 8 hours, manual labor. They need someone who can handle heavy lifting. "I'll take it." "You sure? You look like hell, kid. And that suit?" "I'll take it," Ethan repeated. Jerry nodded slowly, writing down an address. "They start at 10:30. You got time to change clothes. And Ethan, whatever happened this morning, don't let it break you. You're better than this grind." Ethan took the address without responding. Better than the grind. He'd believed that once, back when he'd had degrees and certifications and a career trajectory that pointed upward. Now he had grease on his sleeve, an empty tank of gas, and the knowledge that he'd chosen someone else's problem over his own survival. He drove home through streets that felt too bright, too normal, too ignorant of personal catastrophe. The apartment looked exactly as he'd left it, Ava's cereal bowl still in the sink, morning light still struggling through dirty windows. Ethan changed into work clothes, jeans and a t-shirt worn soft from repeated washing. He looked at himself in the bathroom mirror, searching for the man who'd confidently knotted a tie 3 hours earlier, who'd believed preparation and competence could overcome bad luck. That man was gone. Or maybe he'd never existed. The construction site sprawled across what would eventually become a shopping complex, all raw earth and skeletal metal frames. Ethan reported to the foreman, a sunburned man named Rick, who barely glanced at him before assigning him to a crew moving concrete forms. The work was exactly as brutal as expected. Manual labor in late morning heat, sweat soaking through his shirt within the first hour, muscles screaming by lunch. Ethan worked mechanically, carrying forms, positioning rebar, following instructions from skilled workers who treated temp labor like interchangeable parts. During the 15-minute lunch break, he sat in the shade of an unfinished wall and checked his phone. A text from his mother. "Call me when you can. I love you." Nothing from Meridian Construction, confirming what he already knew, that door had closed permanently. His phone battery showed 15%. Ethan closed his eyes, listening to the sounds of construction, wondering how his life had derailed so completely in a single morning. By the end of the shift, every muscle ached. The foreman counted out cash, $87 after the temp agency's cut, and dismissed him without ceremony. Ethan drove home slowly, too tired for radio, too defeated for thought. Ava was waiting on the front steps with his mother, her backpack beside her, obviously watching for his car. She jumped up when the Honda appeared, racing toward him with 6-year-old enthusiasm. "Daddy! How was the interview? Did you get the job?" Ethan climbed out of the car, trying to summon energy he didn't possess. "Not today, sweetheart, but there will be other opportunities." Ava's face fell. "But you were so ready. You look so handsome." "Sometimes things don't work out the way we plan." Ethan hugged her, breathing in strawberry shampoo and childhood innocence. "But we're okay. We're always okay." Margaret approached, her expression carefully neutral. "I kept Ava for a few extra hours. Thought you might need time to decompress." "Thanks, Mom." "Ethan, not now, please." She nodded, understanding in her eyes. "I'll call you tomorrow. Ava, give Grandma a kiss." After they left, Ethan and Ava climbed the stairs to their apartment. The rooms felt smaller than usual, the walls closing in with familiar pressure. "Can we still get pizza?" Ava asked quietly. The pinky promise echoed in Ethan's memory, another commitment made in confidence and broken by circumstance. "Not tonight, baby, but soon. I promise." "You always say soon." The words landed like physical blows. "I know, and I'm sorry, but I need you to trust me, okay? Things are going to get better." Ava nodded, but something in her eyes looked older, more aware of the precarious foundation their life was built on. That night, after Ava fell asleep, Ethan sat in the dark living room with Olivia Hayes' business card. Embossed letters caught the streetlight filtering through windows. CEO, downtown address. A different universe entirely. He'd sacrificed everything for someone who lived in that universe. Someone who would return to air-conditioned offices and important meetings while he collected day labor wages and wondered how to make $87 stretch until the next paycheck. The anger came suddenly, overwhelming, directed at himself and the universe and the impossible math of being a decent human being when decency was a luxury he couldn't afford. Ethan tore the business card in half, then quarters, letting the pieces fall like expensive confetti onto the coffee table. Empty gesture, meaningless defiance, but it felt like something. His phone buzzed. A reminder about rent due in 8 days. He dismissed it, too exhausted for math, too defeated for solutions. Tomorrow he'd call Jerry again, take whatever work existed, continue the grinding struggle toward an invisible finish line. Tomorrow he'd lie to his daughter again, promise better days that refused to materialize. Tomorrow he'd be the man he'd become, practical, defeated, small. But tonight, in the darkness of a living room that smelled like burnt toast and broken promises, Ethan Cole allowed himself one dangerous thought. What if the choice he'd made this morning mattered? What if compassion counted for something beyond the immediate cost? The thought lasted only moments before reality reasserted itself. Compassion didn't pay rent. Kindness didn't feed children. Good intentions were currency in an economy that didn't exist. Ethan gathered the torn pieces of Olivia Hayes' business card and dropped them in the trash, burying them beneath coffee grounds and yesterday's mail. Out of sight, out of mind, out of his life. He had no way of knowing that across the city, in an office with floor-to-ceiling windows and furniture worth more than his car, Olivia Hayes was staring at her own phone, trying to remember the face of the man who'd saved her morning, trying to find a way to repay a debt she didn't fully understand but somehow knew was important. The city stretched between them, vast and indifferent, full of people who would never meet again, connections that began and ended in single moments. Ethan turned off the lights and headed toward bed, carrying the weight of the day like stones in his pockets. Tomorrow would come whether he was ready or not. Tomorrow always did. In her room, Ava slept with her favorite stuffed rabbit, dreaming whatever dreams sustained 6-year-olds through uncertain times. The nightlight cast soft shadows across her peaceful face, and for a moment, watching her breathe, Ethan felt something other than despair. Love. Pure and uncomplicated. The kind of love that made impossible choices and accepted consequences. The kind of love that stopped on empty roads for stranded strangers, even when stopping cost everything. Maybe that would be enough. Maybe love had to be enough, when nothing else remained. Ethan closed her door softly and collapsed into his own bed, fully dressed, too exhausted for ritual. Sleep came quickly, heavy and dreamless, offering temporary escape from the mathematics of survival and the lingering question of whether he'd been brave or just foolish on a road that had changed everything. The alarm clock's harsh beep pulled Ethan from shallow sleep at 5:30 a.m. His body protested immediately, muscles stiff from yesterday's construction work, back aching in places he'd forgotten could ache. He lay in the darkness for 30 seconds, gathering the will to move, before forcing himself upright. The apartment was silent except for the refrigerator's familiar hum. Ethan shuffled to the bathroom, avoiding his reflection in the mirror as he splashed cold water on his face. His hands still bore traces of yesterday's labor, calluses forming on his palms, a bruised thumbnail from a mishandled concrete form, dirt embedded under fingernails despite scrubbing. These weren't the hands of a structural engineer. They were the hands of someone invisible, interchangeable, forgotten by the end of each shift. In the kitchen, Ethan made instant coffee with water heated in the microwave because the coffee maker had died 3 weeks ago and replacements cost money he didn't have. The bitter liquid tasted like defeat, but the caffeine was necessary. Jerry had texted late last night with another job, roofing work on the south side, 10-hour shift if he wanted it. He wanted it, needed it. Rent was due in 7 days. Ethan dressed in the same work clothes from yesterday, still carrying the faint smell of sweat and concrete dust. His interview suit hung in the closet like an artifact from someone else's life, the grease stain on the sleeve a permanent reminder of choices and consequences. The drive to the job site took 40 minutes through pre-dawn darkness. Other cars on the road carried people to offices and careers, lives that operated on salary and benefits and the assumption of tomorrow. Ethan had once been one of them, back when the future extended beyond next week's paycheck. The roofing site was a residential development, cookie-cutter houses in various stages of completion. Ethan reported to a crew leader named Tommy, a weathered man in his 50s who'd probably been doing this work since before Ethan was born. "You done roofing before?" Tommy asked, skepticism evident in his tone. Some, a lie, but admitting complete inexperience would cost him the day's work. Right, well, you're on tear-off crew. We're stripping the old roof on House 17. You know how to use a roofing shovel? Yeah. Tommy handed him tools and a pair of worn gloves. Try not to fall off. Insurance paperwork's a pain in my ass. The work began as the sun crept above the horizon, painting the development in shades of orange and gold that would have been beautiful if Ethan had energy for appreciation. The tear-off crew consisted of 4 men who treated conversation as optional and efficiency as survival. They climbed onto the pitched roof and began ripping up old shingles, working in a rhythm that Ethan struggled to match. By 9 a.m., his shoulders burned. By 10:30, his lower back felt like someone had driven a spike through his vertebrae. The sun climbed higher, turning the roof into a griddle, heat radiating up through his boots. "Water break," Tommy called around 11. Ethan climbed down the ladder carefully, legs shaking from exertion. The crew gathered in the shade of an unfinished garage, drinking from coolers and saying little. Ethan checked his phone, hoping for messages that didn't exist. Nothing from job applications he'd sent out over the past months. Nothing from Meridian Construction reversing their decision. Nothing but a reminder that his phone bill was due in 3 days. "You all right?" One of the crew members, a younger guy named Marcus, studied him with mild concern. "You look rough." "I'm fine." "First time doing this kind of work?" "No." Another lie, easier than the truth. Marcus nodded slowly, clearly unconvinced. "If you need to slow down, just say something. Tommy acts tough, but he doesn't want anyone getting hurt." "I'm good, really." The afternoon stretched into eternity. Ethan's hands blistered despite the gloves. His arms felt like dead weight, and twice he nearly lost his balance on the pitched surface. Around 3 p.m., Tommy sent him to ground crew, hauling debris to the dumpster. Less skilled work, probably because Ethan's incompetence was becoming obvious, but at least it didn't require heights. The shift finally ended at 6. Tommy counted out cash, $92 after the agency cut, and dismissed the crew without ceremony. Ethan sat in his Honda for 10 minutes before driving, too exhausted to trust his reflexes. The apartment felt like sanctuary despite its shabbiness. Ava was already home, Mrs. Chen from next door having picked her up from school as arranged. The elderly woman accepted $15 for her time, money Ethan could barely spare but had no choice about. Childcare cost more than he earned, but leaving Ava alone was unthinkable. "Daddy!" Ava ran to him, then stopped, wrinkling her nose. "You smell funny." "I've been working hard. How was school?" "Good. We learned about butterflies, and Mrs. Patterson said my drawing was beautiful. And Josh said he wants to be my boyfriend, but I said no because boys are gross." She delivered this information in a single breath, eyes bright with 6-year-old certainty. Ethan smiled despite his exhaustion. "Sounds like a busy day. Can we make spaghetti for dinner, please?" Spaghetti meant pasta and sauce, cheap and filling. "Sure, baby. Give Daddy a few minutes to clean up." In the shower, Ethan stood under lukewarm water, the hot water heater was temperamental at best, and watched the day's grime circle the drain. His body was transforming, muscles becoming leaner and harder, weight dropping from a frame that had never carried excess. He was becoming someone who labored rather than engineered, someone defined by physical output rather than intellectual capacity. The mirror showed sunburn across his nose and cheeks, new lines around his eyes, a gauntness that spoke of too much work and not enough food. 34 years old, and he looked 40. How much older would he look after another year of this? 5 years? 10? Dinner was quiet, Ava chattering about school while Ethan pushed pasta around his plate. Appetite minimal, despite burning thousands of calories. His phone sat face down on the table, a small defense against the constant anxiety of checking for messages that wouldn't come. "Daddy, are you listening?" Ethan looked up, realizing he'd completely missed whatever Ava had been saying. "I'm sorry, sweetheart. I'm really tired. What did you say?" "I said Mrs. Patterson wants us to bring pictures of our family for a project. Can we take one together?" "Of course. We'll do it this weekend." "A good one? Not like the ones on your phone where you always look grumpy." "I don't always look grumpy." Ava gave him a look of profound skepticism that was far too mature for her age. "You kind of do, Daddy. You used to smile more." The observation hit harder than any physical labor. "I'll try to smile more, I promise." Pinky promise? They linked fingers, and Ethan felt the weight of yet another commitment added to the pile of promises he was struggling to keep. After dinner, while Ava completed homework at the kitchen table, Ethan's phone buzzed. A text from Jerry. Got steady work if you want it. Commercial site downtown, 3-week project minimum. Good crew, better pay. Interested? Ethan typed back immediately. Yes? Details? General labor, some concrete work. 8-hour days, 6 days a week. Starts Monday. $115 day rate. The math calculated automatically in Ethan's exhausted brain. 6 days a week at $115 was $690 before the agency cut, roughly $520 after. $2,000 plus per month, enough to cover rent and utilities with some left over for food and gas. Not remotely what he'd earned as an engineer, but more than the sporadic day labor he'd been surviving on. I'll take it, he texted back. Good man. Details coming tomorrow. Ethan set the phone down, feeling something that wasn't quite relief but approximated it. 3 weeks of steady work meant 3 weeks of not scrambling for daily jobs. 3 weeks of predictable income. Small victories counted when larger ones were impossible. That night, after putting Ava to bed, Ethan sat at the kitchen table with his laptop and a stack of bills. The rent notice glared at him in bold letters. Due October 15th, $1,200. He had $700 in his checking account after today's work. The utilities added another $180. Phone bill, $90. Groceries, at least $200 if he stretched things. The math didn't work. It never worked, no matter how many times he recalculated. Ethan opened his email, scanning through the automated rejections from recent job applications. Thank you for your interest, but we've decided to move forward with other candidates. The same message, different company names, a litany of closed doors and missed opportunities. His finger hovered over the search bar, ready to look for new engineering positions before exhaustion won. What was the point? 8 months of applications had yielded exactly one interview, the one he'd missed while helping a stranger who'd probably forgotten his name already. The thought of Olivia Hayes brought a surge of anger so sudden it surprised him. She was probably in her expensive office or expensive apartment, completely unaware that her roadside crisis had demolished someone else's future. Why should she know? Why should she care? People like her didn't think about collateral damage. Ethan slammed the laptop closed harder than necessary, the sound loud in the quiet apartment. His mother's voice echoed in his memory from their phone conversation earlier. Everything happens for a reason, honey. Maybe this is leading you somewhere better. He'd barely restrained himself from screaming. Better than what? Better than security? Better than being able to feed his daughter without anxiety? Better than not having to choose between electricity and groceries? The platitudes of the comfortable were worthless to those drowning. Sleep came in fragments that night, interrupted by stress dreams about falling off roofs and missed interviews, and Ava asking questions he couldn't answer. When the alarm sounded at 5:30, Ethan felt like he'd been awake the entire night. Friday brought more roofing work, the same brutal cycle of physical labor and minimal pay. Saturday was a half day on a different site, demolition work that left him covered in drywall dust and paint chips. Sunday he tried to rest, taking Ava to a free park where she played on rusty equipment while he sat on a bench and pretended his entire body didn't ache. "Daddy, push me on the swing!" Ethan forced himself upright, ignoring protesting muscles, and pushed Ava's swing in long arcs that made her shriek with delight. Other families populated the park, couples with strollers, groups of children, the normal tableau of weekend recreation. They probably had health insurance and retirement accounts and futures that extended beyond next week. "Higher, Daddy, higher!" He pushed harder, watching Ava's hair stream behind her, her laughter cutting through his exhaustion and resentment. This was why. This moment, this child, this fierce love that made impossible mathematics irrelevant. He would do any work, endure any hardship, sacrifice any dream if it kept Ava safe and fed and capable of joy. Monday morning arrived with rain, the kind of cold drizzle that made outdoor work miserable. Ethan reported to the commercial construction site Jerry had mentioned, a massive project in the downtown area, a future office complex that would probably house the kind of professionals he used to be. The site supervisor, a broad-shouldered man named Ray, looked him over with the practiced eye of someone who'd managed laborers for decades. "You're the new guy from Rapid Labor?" Ethan Cole. Cole. Right. You got steel-toe boots? Ethan gestured to his feet. Yeah. The hard hat, safety glasses, work gloves? All of it. Ray nodded, seemingly satisfied. We're pouring foundation this week. You'll be on the crew prepping rebar and checking forms. You know anything about concrete work? Some. More than roofing, at least. His engineering background actually helped here, though he wasn't about to mention it. Good. Report to Tommy. Different Tommy than anywhere else you've worked, probably. Big guy, bald, tattoo sleeve on his right arm. He'll get you sorted. The work proved marginally more interesting than tearing off shingles or hauling demolition debris. Ethan joined a crew of 8 men preparing for a major concrete pour, checking the level and alignment of forms, tying rebar in precise patterns, ensuring everything met specifications that Ethan could have written if anyone had asked him to. The irony wasn't lost on him. He'd spent years learning the theory behind structural engineering, could calculate load requirements and stress distributions in his sleep, but here he was using that knowledge to do manual labor while someone else, someone who'd gotten luckier or been more punctual, sat in an office making those calculations professionally. You're pretty good at this. Tommy, bald, tattooed, exactly as described, watched Ethan tie rebar with practiced efficiency. You done concrete work before? Yeah, some projects here and there. Where'd you work previously? I know most of the crews in the city. Ethan focused on the rebar, avoiding eye contact. Different places. Moved around a lot. Tommy grunted, clearly sensing evasion but choosing not to push. Well, you know what you're doing. That's better than most temps we get. The rain continued throughout the day, turning the site into a muddy obstacle course. Ethan's clothes were soaked through by lunch, his boots squelching with every step. But the work continued. Concrete didn't care about weather, and schedules didn't accommodate comfort. During the brief lunch break, Ethan sat in the cab of his Honda, eating a peanut butter sandwich he'd made that morning and checking his phone. A text from his mother. Just thinking about you. Love you. Nothing that required response, just her persistent presence in his life despite his recent withdrawal. Another text, this one from a number he didn't recognize. Mr. Cole, this is Jennifer from Meridian Construction. We wanted to follow up regarding your missed interview. Please contact us at your earliest convenience. Ethan stared at the message, reading it 3 times to make sure he wasn't hallucinating from exhaustion. Meridian Construction wanted to follow up? About what? To rub salt in the wound? To lecture him about professionalism? He typed back with cold, wet fingers. I was told the position was filled. What's there to discuss? The response came within minutes. There may have been a miscommunication. Mr. Morrison would like to speak with you. Are you available for a phone call this afternoon? Ethan's heart rate accelerated. A miscommunication? What did that mean? Had they reconsidered? Was this some kind of second chance? I'm working until 5 p.m. Can do a call after that. Perfect. Mr. Morrison will call you at 5:30. Thank you. The afternoon passed in a haze of speculation and cautious hope. Ethan worked mechanically, tying rebar and checking measurements while his mind spun through possibilities. Maybe they'd had another candidate drop out. Maybe the hiring manager had been overruled. Maybe, somehow, impossibly, this nightmare had an exit. At 5 p.m., Ray dismissed the crew. Ethan sat in his car, engine running for heat, watching the clock creep toward 5:30. His phone rang at exactly 5:28. This is Ethan. Mr. Cole, Derek Morrison from Meridian Construction. Thank you for making time to speak with me. Of course. Ethan kept his voice neutral, professional, suppressing the desperate hope threatening to leak through. I wanted to personally apologize for the confusion regarding your interview last week. There was a miscommunication in our scheduling system, and we realize now that we may have been too hasty in our decision. I appreciate that. Ethan waited, refusing to make this easy. The position is still open, actually. The candidate we moved forward with accepted another offer. We'd like to reschedule your interview if you're still interested. Still interested. As if Ethan had options. As if he was choosing between multiple opportunities rather than drowning in day labor and desperation. I'm interested, he said carefully, but I want to be clear. I had a legitimate emergency last week. I wasn't blowing off the interview. We understand. These things happen. Would you be available this Friday at 10 a.m.? Friday. 3 days away. 3 days to prepare, to resurrect the professional version of himself, to pretend the past week hadn't broken something fundamental. I can make that work. Excellent. We'll send a confirmation email with details. And Mr. Cole, we're genuinely impressed with your qualifications. We're looking forward to meeting you. The call ended. Ethan sat in the Honda, rain drumming on the roof, trying to process what had just happened. A second chance. An actual, legitimate second chance at the position that could change everything. His hands shook as he dialed his mother's number. Ethan? Honey, is everything okay? Mom, they called back. Meridian Construction. They want to reschedule the interview. Margaret's gasp was audible. Oh, sweetheart, that's wonderful. When? Friday at 10. You're going to do great. I know it. I've been praying. She caught herself, knowing his complicated relationship with Faith. I've been hoping for exactly this. I can't mess this up again, Mom. I can't. You won't. You're going to walk in there and show them exactly how qualified you are. This is your chance, honey. Your real chance. After they hung up, Ethan drove home through rain-slick streets, his mind already racing through preparation. He'd need to research the company again, refresh his knowledge of recent projects, practice answering interview questions. The suit would need dry cleaning to remove the grease stain. He'd need a haircut. Everything had to be perfect. The apartment was dark when he arrived, Ava already at his mother's for the night as arranged. Ethan stood in the empty living room, still in his soaked work clothes, and felt tears threatening for the first time in months. Hope was dangerous. Hope created expectations that reality delighted in destroying. But standing there alone, Ethan couldn't help but feel it anyway. A fragile, terrifying possibility that maybe things could actually improve. The week crawled by with agonizing slowness. Tuesday and Wednesday brought more concrete work at the commercial site, Ethan's body adapting to the physical demands even as his mind remained fixed on Friday's interview. Thursday he took off despite needing the money, using the day to prepare. The suit came back from the dry cleaners looking almost new, the grease stain completely removed by chemicals and expertise. Ethan got a haircut at a cheap barber shop, sat through another round of interview prep questions, researched Meridian Construction until he could recite their project history from memory. Thursday night, after putting Ava to bed, he stood in front of the bathroom mirror practicing his introduction. Good morning. I'm Ethan Cole, and I'm excited for the opportunity to discuss how my experience in structural engineering can contribute to Meridian's continued growth. The words sounded hollow, rehearsed, desperate. He tried again, adjusting his tone, his posture, his expression, searching for the confidence that used to come naturally. Daddy, you're talking to yourself again. Ava stood in the doorway in her pajamas, rubbing her eyes. Just practicing for tomorrow, baby. What are you doing out of bed? I had a bad dream. Can I sleep with you tonight? Ethan picked her up, carrying her to his bed, grateful for the distraction from his spiraling anxiety. Ava curled against him, small and warm and completely trusting. Are you going to get the job tomorrow? She asked sleepily. I'm going to try my very best. You'll get it. You're the smartest daddy in the whole world. I love you, Ava. Love you too, Daddy, more than all the butterflies we learned about. She fell asleep within minutes, her breathing deep and even. Ethan lay awake beside her, staring at the ceiling, mentally rehearsing answers to questions he hoped they'd ask. What are your greatest strengths? I'm detail-oriented, analytical, and committed to excellence in structural design. Why did you leave your previous position? Company-wide layoffs, circumstances beyond my control, eager to apply my skills in a new environment. Where do you see yourself in 5 years? Contributing to major projects, advancing in responsibility, continuing to grow professionally. The answers felt like lines from a script, words that meant nothing and everything simultaneously. But they were the right words, the expected words, the words that might convince strangers to offer him salvation. Friday morning arrived with crystal-clear skies, as if the universe was offering visual contrast to the rainy uncertainty of the previous week. Ethan dressed carefully, checking his appearance multiple times. The suit fit well, the tie was perfectly knotted, his shoes were polished to a dull shine. He looked like someone worth hiring, someone competent and professional and reliable. He looked like someone he used to be. The drive downtown felt surreal, familiar landmarks taking on new significance. This was the same route he'd traveled the previous week, the same expressway, the same exits. But this time there would be no stranded strangers, no impossible choices, no last-minute catastrophes. This time he'd arrive early, prepared, ready. Ethan parked in a public garage 3 blocks from Meridian Construction's offices, giving himself extra time to walk and collect his thoughts. The morning air was crisp, autumn asserting itself in earnest, and the city hummed with its usual Friday energy. The Meridian building was modern glass and steel, the kind of architecture that projected success and permanence. Ethan entered the lobby, announced himself to security, and was directed to the 11th floor. The elevator ride felt longer than physically possible, his reflection in the polished doors showing someone calm and confident, a professional ready for the next chapter. His heart hammered against his ribs, contradicting the external composure. The 11th floor reception area was sleek and expensive, with minimalist furniture and abstract art that probably cost more than Ethan's annual salary at his previous job. A receptionist smiled professionally. "Good morning. How can I help you?" "Ethan Cole, I have a 10 o'clock interview with Derek Morrison." "Of course, Mr. Cole. Please have a seat. Someone will be with you shortly." Ethan sat in a chair designed more for aesthetics than comfort, watching other people move through the space with purpose and belonging. They were on the inside, part of the functioning machinery of success. He was an outsider, petitioning for entry, hoping his qualifications outweighed his desperation. At exactly 10 a.m., a woman in a charcoal suit approached. "Mr. Cole? I'm Sarah Chen, Director of Engineering. Derek asked me to bring you back." Ethan stood, shaking her offered hand with what he hoped was the right amount of firmness. "Thank you. I appreciate the opportunity." "Of course. We're excited to meet you. Your resume is impressive." They walked down a corridor lined with framed photos of completed projects, office buildings, bridges, commercial complexes, the kind of work Ethan had dreamed of contributing to. Sarah made small talk about the weather and traffic, the social lubricant that preceded serious evaluation. The conference room held 3 people: Derek Morrison, whom Ethan recognized from his LinkedIn photo, an older man introduced as Robert Vaughn, Senior Project Manager, and another woman, Victoria Park, Head of Structural Design. "Mr. Cole, thank you for coming in." Derek gestured to an empty chair. "Please sit. Can we get you anything? Coffee? Water?" "Water would be great, thank you." The interview began with standard questions, the expected dance of qualification and competence. Ethan described his previous work, his approach to structural challenges, his experience with various design software and building codes. The answers came smoothly, years of expertise translating into confident explanations. "Your experience at Morrison Engineering is particularly relevant," Victoria said, studying his resume. "The Riverside Complex project, can you talk about your specific contributions there?" Ethan walked through his role in the high-rise design, explaining load calculations and foundation systems with the kind of detail that demonstrated genuine expertise. He could see Victoria nodding, recognizing competence when she heard it. "I have to ask," Robert leaned forward, his expression serious. "You left Morrison Engineering 8 months ago. What have you been doing since then?" The question Ethan had been dreading, the gap that required explanation without sounding desperate or damaged. "I've been doing consulting work while being selective about my next position," he said carefully. "After the layoffs, I wanted to make sure my next role was the right fit, rather than jumping at the first opportunity." "Consulting in what capacity?" "Various projects, mostly residential work and smaller commercial applications. It's given me perspective on different aspects of the industry." The lies tasted wrong, but the truth, that he'd been hauling concrete and tearing off roofs, would end the interview immediately. They wanted someone who'd been in demand, carefully considering options, not someone who'd been desperate enough to take any work available. The interview continued for 45 minutes, technical questions interspersed with cultural fit assessments. Ethan performed well, could feel it in the way they engaged with his answers, the follow-up questions that suggested genuine interest rather than polite obligation. "Last question," Derek said. "Why Meridian Construction? What attracted you to this position specifically?" Ethan had prepared for this, had crafted an answer about company reputation and exciting projects and professional growth. But sitting in that conference room, looking at these people who held his future in their hands, he felt exhausted by performance. Honestly? He took a breath. Because I want to be part of building things that matter. I want to use my skills on projects that challenge me and contribute to something larger than myself. Meridian does that kind of work, and I want to be part of that team. The honesty seemed to resonate. Derek nodded slowly, exchanging glances with the others. Well, Mr. Cole, thank you for coming in. We'll be making our decision early next week, and we'll be in touch regardless of the outcome. They shook hands, Sarah escorted him back to the lobby, and suddenly Ethan was standing on the sidewalk in brilliant sunshine, the interview over, his fate once again in someone else's hands. He'd done well. He knew he'd done well. But knowing meant nothing against the anxiety of waiting, the possibility that well wouldn't be enough. Ethan walked back to his car slowly, trying to read meaning in every word that had been spoken, every expression he'd seen. Did Derek's final nod mean something positive? Did Robert's question suggest concern or merely thoroughness? Was Victoria's engagement genuine interest or professional courtesy? The weekend stretched ahead, hours of speculation with no answers. At home, Ava met him at the door, bouncing with excitement. How did it go? Did you get the job? They'll let me know next week, sweetheart, but I think it went really well. I knew it would. You're the best engineer ever. Ethan hugged her, drawing strength from her unshakable faith in him. How about we celebrate anyway? Want to get ice cream? Really? Even though you don't know yet? Really, because sometimes you have to celebrate the effort, not just the outcome. They drove to a cheap ice cream place, sharing a sundae because two cost too much, and Ethan tried to live in the moment rather than the future. Ava chattered about school and friends and a caterpillar she'd found on the playground, and for those brief minutes, Ethan let himself believe that everything might actually work out. That night, after Ava fell asleep, his phone buzzed with a text from Jerry. Need you Monday? Same commercial site, good money. Ethan stared at the message, calculating probabilities. If Meridian offered him the position, he'd need to give the temp agency notice, but could probably start within a week or two. If they didn't, he'd need every dollar he could earn to stay afloat while continuing the job search. Put me down for Monday, he texted back. We'll confirm Sunday night if anything changes. Sunday evening, with no word from Meridian, Ethan confirmed with Jerry and resigned himself to at least one more week of concrete work while waiting for news that might never come. Monday morning found him back at the commercial site, back in work clothes and steel-toe boots, back to being invisible in a way that professional engineers never were. The cognitive dissonance was crushing. On Friday, he'd been discussing structural load calculations in a conference room. On Monday, he was hauling rebar in the mud. Tommy greeted him with a nod. Heard you might be leaving us soon. Just an interview, nothing certain. Well, if you do land something, good for you. You're too smart for this work anyway. The observation stung precisely because it was true. Ethan was too educated, too qualified, too experienced for manual labor. But qualifications meant nothing when doors stayed closed, when bad timing and worse luck conspired against competence. The day passed in familiar patterns. Physical work that required minimal thought, allowing Ethan's mind to obsess over the interview, replaying every answer, every interaction, searching for clues about his prospects. Tuesday brought more of the same. Wednesday morning, during the crew's coffee break, Ethan's phone rang with an unfamiliar number. This is Ethan. Mr. Cole, Derek Morrison from Meridian Construction. Do you have a moment to talk? Ethan's heart stopped. Yes, absolutely. I wanted to call personally to let you know that we've made our decision. Mr. Cole, we'd like to offer you the senior structural engineer position. The world seemed to tilt sideways. Ethan gripped his phone harder, certain he'd misheard. I'm sorry, could you repeat that? Derek laughed. We're offering you the job. The team was unanimous in their assessment. Your qualifications are excellent, and we believe you'd be a strong addition to our engineering department. Thank you. Thank you so much. I accept. Wonderful. We'll send over the formal offer letter today with all the details, salary, benefits, start date. Please review it and let us know if you have any questions. After the call ended, Ethan stood in the mud of a construction site, surrounded by concrete forms and rebar, wearing clothes stained with yesterday's work, and felt tears streaming down his face. He had the job. After 8 months of desperation and grinding poverty and impossible choices, he had an actual engineering position with actual salary and actual future. Tommy approached, concern crossing his weathered features. "Everything okay?" "I got it," Ethan said, voice breaking. "I got the job." Tommy's face split into a genuine smile. "Hey, that's fantastic. Good for you, man. Really." Ethan worked the rest of the day in a daze, his body going through familiar motions while his mind spun through implications. The offer letter arrived during lunch, $85,000 annually, full benefits, 3 weeks paid vacation, retirement matching. Numbers that represented not just income, but transformation. He could afford rent, could buy groceries without anxiety, could take Ava to the pizza place and mean it. That evening, Ethan picked up Ava from his mother's house, barely containing his excitement. "Guess what, baby?" "What?" "I got the job, the engineering job. We're going to be okay." Ava screamed with delight, jumping into his arms. "I knew it. I knew you would. Does this mean we can get pizza?" "This means we can get pizza. Tonight, the place with the games." Margaret hugged them both, tears in her eyes. "I'm so proud of you, honey. So incredibly proud." At the pizza place, Ava played games with tokens Ethan bought without counting, eating pizza without worrying about the cost. She laughed and celebrated and reminded him exactly why every struggle had been worth it. Later, with Ava asleep and the apartment quiet, Ethan sat in the darkness and let himself feel the full weight of relief. He'd survived. Against odds that seemed insurmountable, through choices that might have destroyed him, he'd survived and somehow landed on his feet. The road that had changed everything, the moment with Olivia Hayes that had cost him one interview, had somehow led here. Not directly, not obviously, but through a series of connections and chances that Ethan couldn't quite map but felt grateful for anyway. He thought about Olivia briefly, wondering if she'd ever known the full cost of his decision to stop. Probably not. People like her rarely understood the precarious mathematics of people like him, but it didn't matter now. He had a future. He had stability. He had the ability to provide for his daughter and rebuild the life that layoffs and bad luck had demolished. Tomorrow he'd go to the commercial site and quit properly, thanking Jerry and Tommy and the others who'd given him work when no one else would. Tomorrow, he'd start planning for his first day at Meridian Construction, preparing to re-enter the professional world he'd been exiled from. But tonight, Ethan simply sat in the darkness and breathed, letting go of the fear that had lived in his chest for 8 months, making room for something that felt dangerously like hope. The optimism lasted exactly 3 weeks. Ethan's first day at Meridian Construction arrived with the kind of nervous energy he remembered from college graduation, that mixture of excitement and terror that came with new beginnings. He'd bought 2 new dress shirts on clearance, pressed his suit until it looked almost expensive, and arrived 30 minutes early to make absolutely certain nothing could go wrong. The engineering department occupied the 12th floor, an open-plan office with individual workstations that somehow managed to feel both collaborative and isolating. Sarah Chen met him in the lobby, professional smile in place, and guided him through orientation with practiced efficiency. "Your desk is here," she said, gesturing to a cubicle near the windows. "Computer's already set up with your login credentials. We'll get you added to the project distribution list this morning, and Derek wants to meet with you at 11 to discuss your initial assignments." Ethan settled into the ergonomic chair, the kind of furniture he'd taken for granted in his previous life, and powered up the dual monitors that made his home laptop seem like a child's toy. Around him, other engineers worked with focused intensity, blueprints spread across desks, conversations happening in the technical shorthand of people who spoke the same professional language. He belonged here. After months of existing on the margins, Ethan was finally back where his education and experience had always suggested he should be. The morning passed in a blur of system tutorials and paperwork, the administrative machinery of corporate employment grinding through its necessary processes. At 11, Derek Morrison appeared at his cubicle. "Ethan, got a minute? Let's talk about getting you integrated into current projects." They walked to a conference room where Victoria Park was already waiting, laptop open, presentation queued up on the wall-mounted screen. "We're bringing you on to the Riverside Extension project," Derek explained. 20-story mixed-use development, residential and commercial spaces. We're in the detailed design phase, working through structural calculations for the tower portion. Victoria pulled up blueprints, and Ethan felt something relax in his chest. This was familiar territory, the kind of work he'd done countless times before the layoffs. Load calculations, material specifications, code compliance checks, technical challenges that had solutions if you knew where to look. Your primary focus will be the podium structure, Victoria continued. We need someone to verify the transfer beam calculations and coordinate with the architectural team on column placement. Think you can handle that? Absolutely. When do you need preliminary results? End of next week would be ideal. We're presenting to the client in 10 days. Ethan spent the afternoon diving into project files, reacquainting himself with the software and methodologies he'd been away from for 8 months. His fingers remembered keyboard shortcuts. His mind slipped back into the logical patterns of structural analysis. And for the first time since the layoffs, Ethan felt competent rather than desperate. That evening, picking up Ava from his mother's house, he couldn't stop smiling. Someone had a good first day, Margaret observed, hugging him. It felt right, Mom. Like I was finally doing what I'm supposed to be doing. I'm so happy for you, honey. You deserve this. Ava monopolized the drive home with questions about his office and coworkers, constructing elaborate stories about what engineering must be like based on her 6-year-old imagination. Ethan let her talk, grateful for her enthusiasm, for the normalcy of discussing his workday, rather than hiding the reality of day labor. The second week brought increased responsibility. Derek assigned him additional projects, clearly testing his capacity and competence. Ethan worked late several evenings, staying until 7 or 8 to ensure his calculations were flawless, his documentation thorough. The extra hours meant less time with Ava, but his mother stepped in without complaint, understanding that Ethan was building something that would benefit them all. By the third week, the rhythm felt established. Morning commute, 8 hours of engineering work, evening with Ava, occasional late nights when deadlines demanded. Ethan's first paycheck arrived. A direct deposit that transformed his checking account from red to black, from anxiety to possibility. He paid rent early, bought groceries without counting every item, even splurged on new shoes for Ava when her old ones finally gave out completely. Friday afternoon of the third week, Ethan was deep in foundation calculations when Derek appeared at his cubicle with an unfamiliar urgency. Ethan, I need you to come with me. Something's come up. The tone suggested this wasn't optional. Ethan saved his work and followed Derek through the office, past curious glances from other engineers, toward the executive suite he'd only glimpsed during his interview. What's going on? Ethan asked, trying to keep pace. Just follow my lead and be professional. That's all I can say right now. They entered a conference room larger and more luxurious than the one where Ethan had interviewed. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered panoramic city views, the kind of space reserved for important clients and high-stakes negotiations. And sitting at the massive table, reviewing documents with focused intensity, was a woman Ethan recognized immediately, despite not having seen her in nearly a month. Olivia Hayes. The recognition hit like physical impact. Her dark hair was pulled back in the same professional style, though now she wore a charcoal suit that probably cost more than Ethan's monthly salary. She looked up as they entered, her expression politely neutral, giving no indication that she recognized him. Why would she? To her, he'd been a stranger who fixed her car, a momentary interaction she'd probably forgotten within days. Ms. Hayes, thank you for your patience, Derek said smoothly. This is Ethan Cole, one of our senior structural engineers. Ethan, this is Olivia Hayes, CEO of Hayes & Associates. They're a potential client for a major development project. Ethan shook her offered hand, maintaining professional composure despite the surreal collision of past and present. Ms. Hayes, pleasure to meet you. Mr. Cole. Her voice was exactly as he remembered, cultured and confident, but something flickered in her eyes. A brief hesitation that suggested recognition trying to surface. Derek gestured for everyone to sit. Ms. Hayes is considering Meridian for structural engineering on a significant mixed-use development. 35 stories, approximately 400,000 square feet of commercial and residential space. She wanted to meet some of our engineering team before making her final decision. The meeting proceeded with the careful choreography of corporate courtship. Derek and Victoria outlined Meridian's qualifications, referenced similar projects, discuss timelines and deliverables. Ethan contributed when asked, explaining technical approaches and demonstrating competence while his mind reeled from the impossible coincidence. Of all the companies Olivia Hayes could have walked into, of all the engineers she could have met, fate had placed them in the same conference room, the same project, the same impossibly complicated moment. Throughout the presentation, Ethan caught Olivia studying him with increasing intensity, her polite attention sharpening into something more focused. The recognition was dawning. He could see it happening in real time, her professional mask slipping to reveal genuine confusion. "I'm sorry," she interrupted Derek mid-sentence. "Mr. Cole, have we met before? You seem very familiar." The room went silent. Derek looked between them, clearly uncertain about this deviation from professional script. Ethan considered lying, dismissing her question with polite denial. But something in Olivia's expression, genuine curiosity mixed with growing certainty, made deflection seem pointless. "We have, actually. About a month ago. Your car broke down on the east side near the industrial district. I stopped to help." Olivia's eyes widened. "That was you? The man who—" She stopped, glancing at Derek and Victoria, clearly recalibrating what was appropriate to discuss in this context. "You fixed my coolant hose." "Yes, ma'am." "I gave you my business card. I told you to call if you ever needed anything." "You did." The air in the conference room felt charged with unspoken questions. Derek shifted uncomfortably, obviously confused about this personal connection and its implications for the business discussion. Olivia turned to Derek. "Would you excuse us for a moment? I'd like to speak with Mr. Cole privately." Derek's professionalism warred with obvious reluctance. "Of course. We'll be right outside if you need anything." He and Victoria left, closing the door behind them. Ethan remained seated, uncertain about protocol, acutely aware that whatever happened in the next few minutes could have serious professional consequences. Olivia stood and walked to the windows, looking out at the city skyline before turning back to face him. "You never called. I meant what I said on that card. If you needed anything, I wanted to help." "I appreciate that, but it wasn't necessary. It was just a car problem." "It was more than that to me. I was stranded, scared, in a neighborhood I didn't know. You helped when you had no reason to, asked for nothing in return, and then disappeared." She paused. "Why didn't you call?" Ethan chose his words carefully. "Because people say things in the moment. Because I didn't want to be the guy who helps someone and then immediately asks for favors. Because it seemed like the right thing to do, not a transaction." "But you were dressed professionally that day. The suit, the portfolio. You were on your way to something important." The conversation was veering into territory Ethan didn't want to explore. Not here, not with his new job still so precarious. "I had somewhere to be." "Where?" Olivia's tone wasn't aggressive, just genuinely curious. "Ms. Hayes, Olivia, please." "Olivia, I'm not sure this is appropriate. You're a potential client. I'm an employee. This feels like it could create complications." She returned to the table, sitting directly across from him. "You're right, it could. But I need to know. That morning meant something to me. Not just because you fixed my car, but because you chose to help when most people wouldn't, and I've been thinking about it for weeks, wondering who you were, whether I'd ever have a chance to properly thank you." "You just did." "No, I didn't. Ethan, may I call you Ethan?" He nodded. "Ethan, where were you going that morning? What was so important that you were wearing a suit and carrying a portfolio?" The truth sat in his throat, heavy and complicated. He could feel the weight of consequences, the potential for this revelation to change everything about his current position. But Olivia's gaze held genuine concern, not just polite interest, and something about her directness demanded honesty. "I was on my way to a job interview," he said quietly. "Here, actually, at Meridian Construction, for the position I currently hold." Understanding dawned across Olivia's features, followed immediately by something that looked like horror. "The interview you missed because of me. I made a choice. It wasn't your fault." "What happened? With the interview?" "I arrived late. They'd already moved on to other candidates. Told me the position was filled." "But you work here now. How—" "They called back a week later. Another candidate had dropped out. They gave me a second chance, and I didn't waste it." Olivia sat back in her chair, processing this information with visible distress. "You lost your interview because you stopped to help me." I chose to stop. That's different. Is it? Ethan, if they hadn't called you back, what would have happened? He considered lying again, minimizing the reality. But Olivia had asked a direct question that deserved a direct answer. I would have continued doing day labor through a temp agency, construction work, roofing, whatever was available. I'd been doing that for 8 months before the interview. 8 months. She repeated the words like they held significance he wasn't seeing. You were unemployed for 8 months, struggling to find work, and you stopped to help a stranger fix her car. It seemed like the right thing to do. At what cost? What did that choice mean for you? Ethan's patience frayed slightly. This interrogation, however well-intentioned, was forcing him to revisit decisions and consequences he'd worked hard to move past. It meant another week of uncertainty, another week of my 6-year-old daughter asking questions I couldn't answer, another week of my mother worried sick about me. It meant continuing to be invisible when I desperately needed to be seen. The rawness in his voice surprised him. Olivia's expression shifted from curiosity to something deeper, more affected. You have a daughter. Yes. And you still stopped. Being a parent doesn't make you less human. It doesn't mean you ignore people in trouble. Silence stretched between them, heavy with implications neither seemed ready to fully articulate. Finally, Olivia spoke, her voice carrying an intensity that made Ethan uneasy. I want to hire you. I'm already employed by Meridian. If you contract with them, I'll likely be on your project anyway. No, I mean directly. I want to hire you as the lead structural engineer for Hayes & Associates. Not as a contractor, as an employee. Full-time, competitive salary, complete authority over all structural decisions on our projects. Ethan stared at her, certain he'd misunderstood. That's not how this works. I have a job. I've been here 3 weeks. I understand, but I'm offering you something better, significantly better. Name your salary requirement, and I'll match it or exceed it. This isn't charity, Ethan. This is recognition of talent and character, both of which are rare. You can't offer someone a job based on a single conversation and a roadside interaction. I can do whatever I want. I own the company. Olivia pulled out her phone, typing rapidly. What's your current salary at Meridian? That's confidential. $85,000. I checked industry standards for senior structural engineers at firms like this. I'll offer you $125,000, plus full benefits, stock options, and a signing bonus to compensate for any inconvenience of changing employers. The numbers were absurd, life-changing, impossible to process in the midst of emotional overwhelm. Olivia, stop. Just stop. This is crazy. Why? Because I want to rectify a situation where you sacrificed your opportunity to help me. Because I recognize that kind of integrity deserves reward. Because it feels like guilt, not business sense. Because I don't want a job handed to me out of some misguided sense of obligation. Olivia leaned forward, her expression fierce. Let me be very clear. My guilt is my own to manage. But this offer isn't about guilt. It's about recognizing that someone with your qualifications, your character, and your dedication belongs in a position where those qualities are valued. I've been looking for a senior engineer for 6 months. The candidates I've interviewed had impressive resumes and terrible instincts. You have both the credentials and the character. That's what I'm hiring. You don't know anything about my work quality. Then prove me wrong. Take the job, show me I made a mistake. But I don't think I am. Ethan's mind raced through implications and consequences. Leaving Meridian after 3 weeks would burn bridges, mark him as unreliable, potentially damage his professional reputation. But the salary Olivia was offering represented a completely different tier of financial security, the kind of money that meant Ava's college fund and retirement savings, and never having to choose between groceries and utilities. I need time to think about this. Of course, take the weekend. Here's my direct number. Olivia wrote on the back of a new business card, sliding it across the table. Call me Monday with your decision. And Ethan, whatever you decide, I meant what I said that morning. If you need anything at all, the offer stands independent of employment. She stood, extending her hand. Ethan shook it, still processing the surreal turn the afternoon had taken. One more thing, Olivia said. Don't make your decision based on what you think you deserve. Make it based on what you know you're worth. There's a difference. She left, And moments later, Derek and Victoria returned, their expressions carefully neutral despite obvious curiosity. "Everything all right?" Derek asked. "Fine, us just clarifying some details about that morning we ran into each other." The rest of the workday passed in a fog. Ethan went through the motions of finishing his calculations, responding to emails, maintaining the appearance of normalcy while his thoughts spiraled through impossible calculations. By 5:30, he gave up pretending to be productive and headed home. That evening, after putting Ava to bed, Ethan called his mother. "Mom, something happened today, something I need to talk through." He explained the meeting with Olivia, the job offer, the impossible decision now sitting in front of him. Margaret listened without interrupting, her silence deliberate and thoughtful. "What does your gut tell you?" she finally asked. "That it's too good to be true. That there has to be a catch. That accepting would make me someone who takes advantage of guilt rather than earns opportunities. And what does your brain tell you? That the salary would change everything. That Olivia's right about my qualifications. That maybe I've been so focused on earning things the hard way that I've forgotten it's okay to accept help when it's offered genuinely. Honey, you stopped to help her when it cost you everything. She's offering you something in return. That's not charity, that's reciprocity. That's the universe evening out the scales." "The universe doesn't work that way, Mom. Doesn't it? You made a choice based on compassion. Now compassion is making a choice based on you. Maybe that's exactly how it works." After they hung up, Ethan sat in the dark apartment and tried to imagine what each path would look like. Staying at Meridian meant stability, predictability. The slow climb up a corporate ladder he understood. Taking Olivia's offer meant uncertainty, the complications of working for someone who felt obligated to him, the risk that guilt rather than merit was driving the opportunity. But it also meant financial security on a level he had never imagined. Meant Ava's future expanding beyond survival into possibility. Meant the difference between barely making it and actually thriving. Saturday morning, Ethan took Ava to the park, pushing her on swings while trying to quiet his racing thoughts. She chattered about school and friends, oblivious to her father's internal crisis. "Daddy, you're not listening again." "I'm sorry, baby. What did you say?" "I said, Mrs. Patterson asked us what our parents do for work. And I said, you're an engineer who builds buildings. And Josh said his dad builds buildings too, but he uses actual hammers. And I said my dad uses computers and math, which is way cooler." Ethan smiled despite himself. "Math is pretty cool. So are you happy at your job? You seem worried a lot." Children's perception was both blessing and curse. "I'm trying to make an important decision, sweetheart. Sometimes grown-ups have to choose between two good things. Then pick the one that makes you smile more." The simplicity of her logic cut through days of complicated analysis. Which option made him smile? Which future felt lighter rather than heavier? Sunday evening, Ethan made his decision. He dialed Olivia's direct number, half expecting voicemail, but she answered on the second ring. "Ethan, have you decided?" "I have, but I need to be very clear about something first." "I'm listening." "If I accept this position, it can't be about that morning. It has to be about my qualifications and nothing else. I don't want to work somewhere because someone feels guilty. I want to work somewhere because I'm genuinely the right person for the job." "Agreed, and you are." "How can you be sure?" "Because in the month since that morning, I've thought constantly about the kind of person who makes that choice, who stops when stopping costs them everything. That's not just character, Ethan. That's judgment. That's the ability to see what matters beyond immediate self-interest. Those are exactly the qualities I need in someone making structural decisions that affect thousands of people. So yes, I'm sure." Ethan took a breath. "Then I accept. But I need 2 weeks to transition properly at Meridian. I won't burn bridges or leave them in a difficult position. 2 weeks is fine. I'll have HR send over the formal offer letter tomorrow. Welcome to Hayes and Associates, Ethan." After the call ended, Ethan sat with the reality of what he'd just done. In 3 weeks, he'd gone from day laborer to corporate engineer to accepting a position that would transform everything about his financial life. The velocity of change felt dizzying, almost frightening in its speed. Monday morning, he arrived at Meridian early and requested a meeting with Derek. "I need to give you my resignation," Ethan said, the words harder than expected. "I've accepted a position with another company. I'll work the next 2 weeks to ensure a smooth transition on my current projects. Derek's disappointment was obvious but professional. Can I ask where you're going? Hayes and Associates, they've offered me a senior engineering position. Something flickered across Derek's face. Surprise, perhaps calculation. Olivia Hayes hired you directly after that meeting? Yes. Based on personal connection rather than professional evaluation. The implication stung. Based on qualifications and fit, the personal connection was coincidental. Ethan, I'm not trying to insult you, but leaving after 3 weeks looks impulsive. It suggests you're not someone who commits to positions long term. Or it suggests I recognize opportunity when it presents itself. Sir, I appreciate everything Meridian has done for me, but this is the right move for my family. Derek nodded slowly. Stand. I'll be sorry to lose you, but I respect the decision. Let's make sure we transition your projects properly. The next 2 weeks passed in careful professionalism. Ethan documented his work exhaustively, met with the engineers who'd be taking over his assignments, and maintained cordial relationships despite some pointed questions about his rapid departure. Victoria caught him on his last day, coffee in hand, expression thoughtful. Can I give you some advice? Of course. Be careful about mixing personal and professional. Olivia Hayes seems like a smart woman, but owing someone your job creates complications. Make sure you maintain boundaries. I appreciate the concern. I'll be careful. I mean it, Ethan. You're talented. Don't let gratitude compromise your professional judgment. The warning stayed with him as he packed his minimal belongings and said goodbye to colleagues he'd barely gotten to know. Derek shook his hand at the elevator, genuine warmth in his expression despite the circumstances. If things don't work out, you're welcome back. The door's open. Thank you. That means a lot. The elevator descended, carrying Ethan away from the safety of the known toward the uncertainty of something new. His phone buzzed with a text from Olivia. Looking forward to tomorrow. Welcome home. Home. The word felt presumptuous, premature. But as Ethan drove through afternoon traffic toward his apartment, toward Ava, and the future he was building brick by brick, he allowed himself to feel cautiously optimistic. Maybe this was home. Maybe after months of exile and struggle, he'd finally found a place where his skills and character were equally valued. Or maybe he was walking into a complicated situation that would explode spectacularly, leaving him with burned bridges and professional damage he couldn't repair. Either way, the choice was made. Tomorrow he'd start at Hayes and Associates, working directly for the woman whose roadside crisis had inadvertently demolished and then rebuilt his entire life. The symmetry was almost poetic. Almost. That evening, Ava asked about his last day at Meridian with the earnest interest of someone who didn't fully understand adult employment, but knew it mattered. Are you sad to leave? A little, but I'm excited about the new job. Will it be better? Ethan pulled her close, breathing in strawberry shampoo and childhood innocence. I think so, baby. I really think so. Then I'm excited too. Can we celebrate? What did you have in mind? Ice cream? The good kind, not the cheap kind that tastes weird? Ethan laughed, the sound surprising him with its genuineness. The good kind. Definitely the good kind. They drove to an actual ice cream parlor, the kind with 20 flavors and toppings that cost extra, and Ethan let Ava order whatever she wanted without calculating the total. She chose chocolate chip cookie dough with gummy bears and sprinkles, a combination that made his teeth hurt just watching her eat it. Daddy, you're smiling. I am? Yeah, like you used to, before everything got hard. The observation landed with unexpected weight. Things are getting better, Ava, I promise. I know. I can tell. She took another enormous bite of ice cream. And when things are really better, can we get a cat? Maybe. Let's see how the new job goes first. Okay, but I'm going to keep asking. I wouldn't expect anything less. On the drive home, Ava fell asleep in the back seat, Sugar Crash claiming her mid-sentence about potential cat names. Ethan carried her upstairs, tucked her into bed, still in her clothes, and stood in her doorway watching her breathe in the gentle rhythm of childhood sleep. Everything he'd done, every impossible choice, every sacrifice, every moment of desperation had been for this. For her safety, her happiness, her future. And now, finally, that future looked brighter than it had in nearly a year. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new complications, new uncertainties. But tonight, standing in the doorway watching his daughter sleep, Ethan allowed himself to believe that maybe, just maybe, the hardest part was behind them. The road that had changed everything continued forward, its destination still unclear, but its direction finally, mercifully, pointing towards something that looked like hope. Monday morning arrived with unseasonable warmth, the kind of October day that felt borrowed from late summer. Ethan stood outside the Hayes and Associates building, glass and steel rising 30 stories into a cloudless sky, and felt his confidence waver for the first time since accepting the position. This was different from Meridian. That had been one engineering firm among many, a place where he'd been just another employee filling a necessary role. This building housed a company owned by the woman whose car he'd fixed, whose crisis had derailed and then somehow reconstructed his entire trajectory. The personal connection that Olivia insisted was irrelevant felt suddenly, overwhelmingly relevant. "You planning to go in, or just admire the architecture?" Ethan turned to find Olivia standing behind him, coffee in each hand, amusement playing at the corners of her mouth. She wore a navy suit that probably cost more than his first car, her dark hair pulled back in the professional style he'd come to recognize as her armor against the world. "Just preparing myself," Ethan admitted. "For what? You've done this before. New job, new office, new colleagues. The mechanics are the same. The context is different." Olivia handed him one of the coffees. "Black, 2 sugars. That's how you took it that morning, right? When you came back with the coolant hose?" The fact that she'd remembered such a small detail felt both touching and slightly unnerving. "Yeah, that's right. Thank you. Come on, let me show you around before everyone else arrives and you get buried in introductions." They entered through a lobby that made Meridian's reception area look modest by comparison. Polished marble floors, abstract sculptures that probably required interpretation, a security desk staffed by people who looked like they took their jobs seriously. Olivia nodded to the guards, who responded with the familiarity of daily routine. The elevator carried them to the 23rd floor in smooth silence. When the doors opened, Ethan found himself looking at an office space that was simultaneously impressive and somehow more human than Meridian's sterile efficiency. Yes, there was expensive furniture and floor-to-ceiling windows, but there were also plants, actual artwork, spaces designed for collaboration rather than just productivity. "Engineering department is here," Olivia explained, gesturing down a corridor. "Your office is this way." "Office? I assumed I'd have a cubicle." "Senior positions get offices. You'll need the space for when you're reviewing plans or meeting with project teams." She led him to a corner office with windows on 2 walls, natural light flooding a space that felt ridiculously generous for someone who'd been hauling concrete a month ago. A desk sat ready with dual monitors, a drafting table occupied one corner, and bookshelves waited to be filled with whatever reference materials Ethan deemed necessary. "This is too much," he said quietly. "This is standard for senior engineering staff. Marcus has an identical office 3 doors down. You'll meet him shortly. He's been with us for 5 years, handles most of our residential projects. You'll be focusing primarily on commercial developments, at least initially." Ethan set his coffee on the desk, running his hand along the smooth surface. "Olivia, can I ask you something directly?" "Always." "How do I know this is real? That I'm actually qualified for this position, and not just someone you're overcompensating for guilt?" Olivia leaned against the doorframe, her expression shifting from professional to something more vulnerable. "You want the truth?" "Please." "When I started looking for a senior engineer 6 months ago, I interviewed 12 candidates. All of them had impressive credentials, master's degrees, years of experience, portfolios full of completed projects, and every single one of them felt wrong. They had the technical skills but lacked something I couldn't quite define. Judgment, maybe. The ability to see beyond immediate calculations to understand what we're actually building and why it matters." She moved to the windows, looking out at the city spread below them. "Then I met you on that road. And yes, the circumstances were unusual. But watching how you approach that problem, methodical, efficient, focused on solutions rather than complaints, that told me something about how you think. Later, when I realized what that choice cost you, that told me something about your priorities and character. That's not the same as evaluating my engineering capabilities." "No, but it's the foundation. I had your work history verified independently. Called your former supervisor at Morrison Engineering. Spoke with professors from your graduate program. Everyone said the same thing. Exceptional technical skills, reliable, innovative problem solver. So yes, Ethan, you're qualified, extremely qualified. The personal connection just gave me the opportunity to recognize what I'd been looking for. Before Ethan could respond, footsteps approached. A man in his early 40s appeared in the doorway, carrying architectural plans and wearing an expression of friendly curiosity. You must be Ethan. I'm Marcus Chen. Welcome to the team. They shook hands, Marcus's grip firm and genuine. Olivia's been talking about you for 2 weeks. She doesn't usually get this excited about new hires, so you must be something special. Just trying to live up to expectations, Ethan said. Good luck with that. Olivia's expectations are famously impossible. Marcus grinned to show he was mostly joking. But seriously, it's great to have another senior engineer. I've been drowning in the West Side Plaza project and could use someone to collaborate with. The morning proceeded with introductions to the rest of the engineering team. 8 people total, ranging from junior drafters fresh out of college to experienced project managers who'd been with Hayes & Associates since its founding. Everyone seemed genuinely welcoming, though Ethan couldn't shake the awareness that they all knew about his connection to Olivia, had probably discussed it extensively before his arrival. By lunch, his head swam with names and project details and the particular culture of a company that operated differently from anywhere he'd worked before. Olivia ran a flat organization, encouraging direct communication and collaborative decision-making in ways that would have been impossible at larger firms. She's intense but fair, Marcus explained over sandwiches in the break room. Expects excellence but understands that mistakes happen. And she actually listens when you explain technical constraints, which is rarer than you'd think with clients turned bosses. How long have you known her? 5 years since I started here. She'd just taken over from her father, was trying to modernize the company while maintaining relationships with old clients. It was chaos initially, but she figured it out. She's brilliant, really. Has an instinct for development opportunities that most people miss. What's it like working for someone who owns the company? Marcus considered the question carefully. Different from corporate environments, more personal, which can be good or complicated depending on the situation. She genuinely cares about the team, remembers birthdays, asks about families, but she also has high standards and doesn't tolerate mediocrity. If you do good work and communicate honestly, you'll be fine. The afternoon brought Ethan's first real assignment. Olivia called him to her office, a massive space on the 25th floor with views that made his corner office seem modest, and spread architectural plans across a conference table. This is the Riverside project I mentioned when we first met. 35 stories, mixed-use development. We've got preliminary architectural plans, but I need a full structural assessment before we commit to the design. Timeline's aggressive. I'm presenting to investors in 3 weeks and need confidence that the building is actually buildable. Ethan studied the plans, his trained eye immediately cataloging challenges and considerations. The design was ambitious, with several cantilevers and a podium structure that would require careful engineering. This is significant work. 3 weeks is tight. Can you do it? I'll need to bring in Marcus for consultation on some elements, and we should probably engage a geotechnical engineer for foundation analysis. But yes, it's doable. Whatever resources you need, you have them. This project is critical, Ethan. If it goes well, it establishes Hayes & Associates as a serious player in large-scale development. If it fails, we've wasted months and significant capital. The pressure was obvious, the stakes clear. Ethan felt the familiar surge of adrenaline that came with challenging engineering problems. I'll start immediately. Can I get soil reports and any existing structural surveys? I'll have them sent to your office within the hour. That evening, Ethan worked until 7, immersed in calculations and structural analysis with an intensity he hadn't felt since before the layoffs. The work was complex enough to demand his full attention, leaving no mental space for anxiety or self-doubt. This was what he was good at, what his education and experience had prepared him for. His phone buzzed with a text from his mother. How was the first day? Good. Really good. Working late, but in a good way. I've got Ava. Take the time you need. Gratitude flooded through him. His mother's unwavering support had been the invisible foundation beneath everything, the safety net that kept catastrophe from becoming complete disaster. He made a mental note to do something special for her once his first paycheck from Hayes & Associates arrived. something that actually reflected appreciation rather than just necessity. The week fell into a demanding rhythm. Ethan arrived early, worked late, collaborated with Marcus on structural solutions, and gradually felt his confidence solidifying. The work was challenging but not impossible, the kind of problems that had clear solutions if you approached them methodically and weren't afraid to ask for help when needed. Friday afternoon, Olivia appeared at his office door. "Got a minute?" "Of course." She entered and closed the door behind her, which immediately signaled this wasn't about engineering questions. "I wanted to check in. How's your first week been?" "Honestly, intense but good. The Riverside project is consuming most of my bandwidth, but I'm making progress." "And the team? Everyone treating you well?" "Yeah, they've been great. Marcus especially has been helpful." Olivia nodded, but something in her expression suggested this wasn't the real conversation she'd come to have. "Can I ask you something personal?" Warning bells rang quietly in Ethan's mind. "Okay. Do you regret it? Stopping that morning? If you could go back knowing what you know now, would you still make the same choice?" The question caught him off guard. "Why does that matter?" "Because I need to know if you resent me. If every time you look at me, you're thinking about what that decision cost you, even temporarily. I can't work with someone who's harboring that kind of resentment." Ethan leaned back in his chair, considering his answer carefully. "Honestly, I don't know. In the moment, yes, I absolutely regretted it. I spent a week thinking I'd made the stupidest decision of my life, that I'd sacrificed my daughter's security for a stranger who'd forget me within days. It was one of the hardest periods I've ever experienced. And now? Now I'm here, working for you, earning more than I've ever earned, actually using my degree for its intended purpose. So no, I don't regret it, but I also don't want to romanticize it. I made a choice that could have destroyed me, and I got lucky. That's the truth." Olivia absorbed this, her expression unreadable. "Thank you for being honest. That's exactly the kind of directness I need from you." She moved toward the door, then paused. "Ethan, for what it's worth, I think about that morning constantly. Not with guilt, exactly, but with gratitude. You reminded me that there are still people who choose compassion over self-interest. In my world, that's rarer than you'd imagine." After she left, Ethan sat in the quiet office and tried to parse what had just happened. The conversation had felt like both a check-in and something deeper, a confirmation that the personal connection underlying their professional relationship wasn't going to disappear just because they avoided discussing it. That weekend, Ethan took Ava to a street fair in a neighborhood they'd never been able to afford before. They ate overpriced festival food, rode a small Ferris wheel, and Ethan bought her a stuffed elephant she'd admired without first calculating whether they could afford it. The freedom from constant financial calculation felt almost disorienting, a relief so profound it bordered on unsettling. "Daddy, you seem happy," Ava observed, hugging her new elephant. "I am happy. Are you happy?" "Yeah, but I miss seeing you more. You're working a lot again." The observation stung precisely because it was accurate. "I know, baby, but this is temporary. Once I get settled in the new job, things will balance out. I promise." "Another promise?" "This one I can keep." Monday brought a complication Ethan hadn't anticipated. He was deep in structural calculations when his office phone rang. "Ethan Cole." "Mr. Cole, this is Derek Morrison from Meridian Construction." Ethan straightened in his chair, immediately wary. "Derek, how can I help you?" "I hope this isn't inappropriate, but I wanted to reach out personally. We've been contracted for structural work on a project that I believe overlaps with something Hayes and Associates is developing, the Riverside Mixed-Use Development." Ice formed in Ethan's stomach. "What kind of overlap?" "Our client is proposing a competing development 3 blocks away. Similar scope, similar timeline. They've asked us to do preliminary structural assessment, and I noticed some of the documentation references Hayes and Associates as a potential competitor for financing and investor interest." "I'm not sure what you want me to say, Derek." "I'm not asking you to say anything. I'm calling as a professional courtesy to let you know that we're going to be competing projects, and I wanted to make sure there's no awkwardness or conflict of interest given your recent transition." The subtext was clear. Derek was establishing a paper trail, protecting Meridian from any potential accusations of corporate espionage or information sharing. I appreciate the heads up. For the record, I've signed all appropriate confidentiality agreements with Hayes and Associates and would never share proprietary information. I never thought you would. I just wanted everything transparent. Good luck with your project, Ethan. May the best design win. After hanging up, Ethan immediately went to Olivia's office. Her assistant waved him through, and he found Olivia on a conference call, which she quickly wrapped up when she saw his expression. What's wrong? Meridian Construction just called. They're doing structural work for a competing development 3 blocks from Riverside. Derek wanted to inform me directly. Olivia's expression hardened. The Patterson Group project? I knew they were sniffing around that site, but I didn't know they'd engage Meridian already. Is this a problem? It's competition, which is normal, but the timeline is suspicious. They've accelerated significantly in the past 2 weeks. She pulled up a file on her computer. How much did Derek tell you about their project? Almost nothing, just that it exists and he wanted to maintain transparency given that I just left his firm. Smart of him, and good that you came directly to me. Olivia studied her screen, clearly calculating strategies and implications. This changes our timeline. We need the structural assessment completed faster than planned. How close are you? Maybe 60% through the analysis. I could push harder, bring in additional resources. Do it. I need preliminary results by end of next week. Can you make that happen? The timeline was brutal, would require long hours and probably weekend work. But Ethan heard himself say, "Yes, I'll make it happen. Thank you." And Ethan, this is exactly the kind of situation where your judgment matters as much as your calculations. I trust you to do this right. The next week became a blur of 18-hour days, takeout meals eaten at his desk, and Ava staying with his mother more than at home. Ethan hated the imbalance, hated missing bedtime stories and morning breakfasts, but the urgency was real and the stakes were clear. Marcus joined the effort, the two of them working late into the nights, bouncing ideas off each other, finding solutions to structural challenges that initially seemed insurmountable. Despite the pressure, Ethan found himself energized by the collaboration, by working with someone who understood the technical challenges and shared the commitment to excellence. "You know she's pushing us because she's scared, right?" Marcus said around midnight on Thursday, both of them bleary-eyed and running on coffee. Scared of what? Failure. This project is Olivia's first major development since taking over from her father. If it fails, if we lose to Patterson Group, it confirms what a lot of people in the industry already believe, that she got the company through inheritance, not merit. She needs this win. The insight added another layer of pressure, but also context. Olivia wasn't just competing for investor dollars. She was competing for legitimacy in an industry that probably still saw her as the daughter rather than the CEO. Friday evening, Ethan delivered the preliminary structural assessment to Olivia's office. She reviewed it carefully, asking pointed questions that demonstrated she actually understood structural engineering despite her business focus. "This is excellent work," she said finally. "Thorough, well-documented, and the solutions you've proposed for the cantilever sections are innovative. I can present this to investors with confidence." Relief flooded through Ethan. Marcus deserves significant credit. He identified the foundation approach that made everything else possible. "I'll make sure he's recognized. But Ethan, this is exactly what I hired you for. Not just technical competence, but the ability to deliver under pressure while maintaining quality." "Thank you." "You're welcome. Though I'll admit the timeline nearly killed me." Olivia's expression softened. "I know I pushed hard, too hard probably. You have a daughter, a life outside this office. I sometimes forget that not everyone is as willing as I am to sacrifice everything for work. It's not about willingness. It's about balance. I want to do excellent work, but I also want to be present for Ava. Those things can coexist." "You're right, and I'll try to be more mindful of that going forward." She paused. "How is Ava, by the way?" I realized I've never asked about her specifically. The shift to personal territory felt both natural and slightly dangerous. "She's good. 6 years old, in first grade, thinks butterflies are the most important thing in the world right now. She's resilient, adapts to changes faster than I do." "Does she know about that morning? About how we met?" "No, I haven't found a way to explain it that makes sense to a 6-year-old. Someday you'll tell her, and I think she'll be proud of you. Not because of where you ended up, but because of the choice you made." The investor presentation happened the following Wednesday. Ethan wasn't directly involved, but waited anxiously in his office for news, refreshing his email every few minutes like a nervous parent waiting for test results. At 3:15, Olivia appeared at his door, her expression unreadable. "They committed," she said quietly. "Full financing, approved the structural design, want to break ground within 2 months." "We won, Ethan. The project is happening." The victory felt enormous. Validation of the brutal hours and sacrificed time with Ava. "That's incredible. Congratulations. This is your win, too. Your structural assessment is what convinced them the project was viable. I made sure they understood that." She held out her hand. "Thank you for everything." They shook hands, the gesture formal but carrying weight that transcended professional courtesy. In that moment, Ethan felt something shift, not from employer-employee to something else, but from tentative connection to genuine partnership. Olivia trusted him, relied on his expertise, valued his contribution, and he'd delivered, proven that her faith wasn't misplaced. That evening, Ethan left the office at a reasonable hour for the first time in 2 weeks and picked up Ava from his mother's house. "Daddy!" She launched herself into his arms. "You're early. Grandma said you'd probably be late again." "Not tonight, baby. Tonight we're celebrating. What do you want for dinner?" "Pizza, the place with the games." Ethan exchanged glances with his mother, who smiled with obvious relief at seeing him more present, more himself. At the pizza place, watching Ava play arcade games with tokens he could now afford without stress, Ethan's phone buzzed with a text from Olivia. "Forgot to mention, your work on Riverside comes with a performance bonus. Check your email when you get a chance. You earned it." The email detailed a bonus that was nearly 20% of his annual salary, money that represented not just compensation, but recognition. Ethan stared at the number, trying to process what it meant for Ava's college fund, for their long-term security, for the future he'd been trying to build from rubble. "Daddy, come play! This game is so fun!" He pocketed his phone and joined his daughter, letting her teach him the rules of some game involving aliens and spaceships. She beat him easily, celebrating her victory with unselfconscious joy, and Ethan felt grateful for this moment, this normalcy, this life that finally felt stable enough to enjoy rather than just endure. The road that had changed everything continued forward, and for the first time since that morning on the empty highway, Ethan could see where it might be leading, toward something that looked remarkably like the life he'd always imagined but never quite believed possible. On the drive home, Ava fell asleep clutching a stuffed prize she'd won, and Ethan drove carefully through quiet streets, aware of how precious this cargo was, how much everything had always been about protecting and providing for this one small person who trusted him completely. His phone buzzed again. Another text from Olivia. "Forgot to say, take Monday off. You've earned a break. Spend time with Ava. Some things matter more than work." Ethan smiled in the darkness of the car, feeling something that had been tightly wound in his chest finally begin to relax. Maybe this was going to work out after all. Maybe the impossible mathematics of balancing competence and compassion, professional excellence and personal presence could actually resolve into something sustainable. Maybe, finally, he could stop surviving and start living. Monday morning felt like luxury. Ethan woke without an alarm, sunlight streaming through curtains that desperately needed replacing, and found Ava already awake reading a picture book in her bed. The simple gift of unhurried time stretched before them like unopened territory. "No work today?" Ava asked, looking up from her book with cautious hope. "No work today. Just you and me. What should we do?" Her eyes widened with possibilities. "Can we go to the Science Museum, the one with the dinosaurs and the planetarium?" "Absolutely. Go get dressed and we'll have breakfast first." They took their time over pancakes Ethan actually made from scratch, rather than a box mix, the kitchen filling with warmth and the smell of vanilla. Ava chattered about school, about her friend Emma who was having a birthday party next week, about the caterpillar she'd been observing during recess that was starting to build a chrysalis. "Mrs. Patterson says it takes 2 weeks to become a butterfly. Can we check on it together when it happens?" "I'll make sure I'm there," Ethan promised, and meant it. The museum visit consumed the entire day. They explored dinosaur exhibits, watched a planetarium show about the solar system, conducted experiments in the hands-on science section. Ethan followed Ava's enthusiastic lead, letting her determine the pace and direction, simply being present in a way that work demands had made impossible for too long. In the planetarium, sitting in darkness while simulated stars wheeled overhead, Ava reached for his hand. "Daddy, are you happy now? Like really happy?" The question caught him off guard. "What makes you ask that?" "Because you smile more. And you don't look worried all the time. And you're here with me instead of working." Ethan squeezed her small hand. "I am happy, baby. Happier than I've been in a long time." "Good. Because I like this daddy better. The one who isn't always thinking about other stuff." The observation stung with its accuracy, but also with gratitude that Ava felt safe enough to voice it. "I like this daddy better too." That evening, after putting Ava to bed, Ethan called his mother. "How was your day off?" Margaret asked. "Perfect. Exactly what I needed. Thank you for everything, Mom. For watching Ava all those times, for believing in me when I couldn't believe in myself, for being the foundation that kept us from completely falling apart. Honey, you don't have to thank me. That's what family does." "I know, but I want to. And I want to do something for you. What if I helped you with some repairs on your house? That roof you've been worried about, the water heater that's been acting up? Let me take care of those things." "Ethan, you don't need to." "I want to. Please let me do this." Margaret's voice wavered slightly. "Okay. Thank you, sweetheart. That would help tremendously." After hanging up, Ethan opened his laptop and began researching contractors, comparing estimates, planning how to properly thank the person who'd carried him through his darkest period. The financial bonus from the Riverside project made these repairs not just possible but easy, a tangible way to transform good fortune into gratitude. The following weeks settled into a sustainable rhythm. Ethan worked normal hours, contributed to multiple projects, and established himself as a reliable presence within Hayes and Associates. The engineering team developed genuine camaraderie, with Marcus becoming not just a colleague but an actual friend who understood the particular pressures of their profession. "You've changed the department dynamics," Marcus mentioned one afternoon over coffee. "In a good way. Olivia's less stressed, which makes everyone less stressed. Whatever you're doing, keep doing it." "I'm just doing my job." "No, it's more than that. You give her confidence in our technical capabilities. She trusts your judgment, which means she questions our work less and advocates for us more with clients. That matters." The observation aligned with what Ethan had noticed. Olivia did seem more relaxed, more willing to delegate, more confident in the team's ability to deliver. Their professional relationship had evolved into something smooth and functional, built on mutual respect and clear communication. But underneath that professional surface, Ethan remained aware of the personal connection that had initiated everything. It surfaced occasionally in small moments, Olivia asking about Ava's school play, Ethan noticing when Olivia seemed particularly stressed, and offering to take on additional work, the shared understanding that their relationship existed in multiple registers simultaneously. 6 weeks after starting at Hayes and Associates, Ethan received an email that made his stomach clench. The subject line read, "Invitation to Industry Awards Ceremony." He opened it to find that Hayes and Associates had been nominated for a Commercial Development Award for the Riverside project, and as the lead structural engineer, Ethan was expected to attend the formal ceremony. The event was black tie, scheduled for a Saturday evening, and would include most of the major players in the city's development industry, including, almost certainly, people from Meridian Construction. Ethan walked to Olivia's office, finding her on a phone call. She gestured for him to wait, wrapping up her conversation efficiently. "What's up?" "The awards ceremony. I saw the invitation." "Isn't it exciting? The nomination is a huge recognition for the company, and specifically for your work on the structural design." "I don't have anything appropriate to wear to a black tie event." Olivia studied him for a moment, then pulled up something on her computer. "There's a formal wear rental place 2 blocks from here. Tell them you're with Hayes and Associates. They'll set you up with everything you need, and bill it to the company account. This is a business event, so it's a business expense." "Olivia, I can't have the company pay for my tuxedo rental." "You can and you will. This isn't charity, Ethan. This is ensuring our team looks professional at an industry event. Besides, you'll be sitting at the Hayes and Associates table, representing the company. Looking the part is literally part of your job that evening. Ethan wanted to argue, but recognized the futility. Okay, thank you. One more thing. You can bring a +1 if you'd like. Partner, friend, whoever. The ticket includes a guest. The automatic response was that he didn't have a +1 to bring, but then Ethan thought of his mother, who'd never attended anything remotely this formal, who'd worked her entire life without recognition or glamour. Could I bring my mom? She's the one who got me through the hard times. I'd like her to see the result. Olivia's expression softened immediately. That's perfect. Absolutely bring your mother. I'd love to meet her. The next Saturday, Ethan picked up the rented tuxedo and brought it home, where Margaret was watching Ava for the evening. His mother's eyes widened when she saw the formal wear. Honey, this is too much. I can't go to something this fancy. Yes, you can. We'll get you a dress. Do this properly. You deserve to be celebrated, Mom. Let me do this for you. They spent the following week shopping for an appropriate gown, eventually finding an elegant navy dress that made Margaret look simultaneously sophisticated and comfortable. Ava insisted on helping her grandmother pick out accessories, treating the entire endeavor like the most important mission of her young life. The night of the ceremony arrived with clear skies and unusual warmth for late November. Ethan picked up his mother, both of them dressed in formal wear that felt like costumes from someone else's life, and drove downtown to the historic hotel hosting the event. I'm nervous, Margaret admitted in the car. What if I use the wrong fork or say something inappropriate? You're going to be perfect. Just be yourself. The hotel ballroom was exactly as intimidating as Ethan had feared. Crystal chandeliers, tables set with more silverware than seemed necessary, hundreds of people in formal wear, networking and socializing with practiced ease. He spotted the Hayes and Associates table and guided his mother through the crowd. Olivia was already there, wearing a stunning emerald dress that made her look like she belonged in this world of wealth and influence. She stood when they approached, extending her hand to Margaret with genuine warmth. Mrs. Cole, I'm so glad to finally meet you. Ethan speaks about you with such love and respect. Margaret shook her hand, clearly intimidated but rallying. Please call me Margaret, and thank you for everything you've done for my son. You've changed our lives. I think we've changed each other's lives. Ethan has been an invaluable addition to our team. Marcus arrived with his wife, and soon the table filled with Hayes and Associates staff and their partners. The conversation flowed easily, discussion of industry developments mixed with personal stories and gentle humor. Ethan watched his mother gradually relax, drawn into conversation by Olivia's inclusive questions and genuine interest. Dinner was served, multiple courses that appeared and disappeared with choreographed precision. Ethan helped his mother navigate the silverware situation, whispering guidance about working from the outside in, and she squeezed his hand gratefully. The awards presentation began after dinner. Various categories were announced: residential development, sustainable design, historic preservation. Ethan's attention drifted until the commercial development category was announced, and the nominees for excellence in commercial development are the Patterson Group for their East Side Tower project, Meridian Construction for the Waterfront Complex, and Hayes and Associates for the Riverside Mixed-Use Development. Ethan's heart rate accelerated. On a screen above the stage, images of each project appeared, architectural renderings, and construction photos that represented months of work and millions of dollars in investment. And the winner is, the presenter opened an envelope with theatrical pause. Hayes and Associates for the Riverside Development. The table erupted in applause. Olivia stood, gesturing for Ethan to join her. He rose on shaking legs, aware that hundreds of people were watching, that somewhere in this room Derek Morrison was probably processing this news, that his mother was crying openly with pride. They walked to the stage together, accepting a crystal award that probably cost more than Ethan's first car. Olivia stepped to the microphone, composed and confident. Thank you so much for this recognition. The Riverside Project represents everything Hayes and Associates strives for: innovative design, sustainable practices, and community integration. But I want to be very clear that this award belongs to our engineering team, and specifically to Ethan Cole, our senior structural engineer. Ethan's technical expertise and creative problem-solving made this project possible. His work exemplifies the kind of excellence we're committed to delivering. She stepped back, gesturing for Ethan to speak. He approached the microphone, heart hammering, acutely aware that anything he said would be remembered and possibly judged. I'm honored to accept this award on behalf of the entire Hayes and Associates team. Engineering is collaborative by nature. It takes architects, contractors, city planners, and countless others working together to transform ideas into reality. I'm grateful to Olivia Hayes for trusting me with this project, to Marcus Chen and our engineering team for their expertise, and to everyone who contributed to making Riverside a success. Thank you. The applause felt overwhelming. They returned to the table where Margaret hugged Ethan with tears streaming down her face. "I'm so proud of you," she whispered. "So incredibly proud." The evening continued with more networking and congratulations from industry colleagues. Ethan found himself in conversation with people he'd only read about in trade publications, accepting compliments with practiced humility, representing Hayes and Associates with the kind of professionalism that now felt natural rather than performative. Later, standing at the bar waiting for drinks, someone approached from behind. "Congratulations, Ethan. Well-deserved recognition." He turned to find Derek Morrison, looking exactly as Ethan remembered. Professional suit, careful smile, the demeanor of someone who'd mastered the art of corporate diplomacy. "Derek, thank you. How have you been?" "Good. Busy. The waterfront project has been consuming most of my time." Derek gestured toward the ballroom. "Looks like leaving Meridian worked out well for you." The subtext was clear, but Ethan chose to address it directly. "It did. But I appreciate the opportunity you gave me, even if the timing didn't work out initially." "No hard feelings, then?" "None. We're all just trying to do good work and build things that matter." Derek nodded slowly, seeming to accept this. "For what it's worth, your structural design for Riverside is impressive. Innovative approach to the cantilever sections. I may have tried to recruit you myself if Olivia hadn't gotten there first." The admission surprised Ethan. "I appreciate that." "Take care of yourself, Ethan, and congratulations again." They shook hands, and Derek disappeared back into the crowd. Ethan stood there processing the encounter, realizing that the professional world was smaller and more interconnected than he'd understood, that bridges maintained rather than burned created opportunities rather than obstacles. The evening finally wound down around midnight. Ethan drove his mother home, both of them exhausted but energized by the surreal experience. "Did that really just happen?" Margaret asked. "Did my son really just accept an award in front of hundreds of people?" "It really happened. And you looked beautiful, Mom. Thank you for being there. Thank you for inviting me. I'll remember this night for the rest of my life." After dropping her off, Ethan drove toward his apartment, the Crystal Award sitting in the passenger seat, catching streetlight and throwing prismatic patterns across the car's interior. His phone buzzed with a text from Olivia. "You represented us perfectly tonight. Thank you for everything." He typed back, "Thank you for the opportunity, for all of it." The response came immediately. "You earned it, every bit of it. Sleep well." At home, Ava was asleep at his mother's house, giving Ethan the apartment to himself. He stood in the living room, still shabby, still filled with furniture that had seen better decades, and felt the dissonance between where he physically lived and where his professional life now existed. The following Monday, Ethan began apartment hunting in earnest. Not extravagantly, but for something cleaner, safer, in a better school district for Ava. The financial stability from Hayes and Associates made this not just possible, but responsible, ensuring Ava's environment matched the future they were building. He found a 2-bedroom apartment in a complex with a playground and a good elementary school within walking distance. The rent was higher than his current place, but well within his budget, and the upgrade in quality was transformative. He signed the lease and began planning the move for January, giving himself time to organize and ensuring minimal disruption to Ava's school year. When he told Ava about the new apartment, her reaction was pure 6-year-old enthusiasm. "Does it have a bathtub? A real one, not the shower that's too small?" "It has a bathtub, and a dishwasher, and windows that actually close all the way." "Can I pick how to decorate my room?" "Within reason, yes. We'll go shopping together." The move happened over a long weekend in early January. Marcus volunteered to help, showing up with his pickup truck and genuine enthusiasm for manual labor. Together they transported boxes and furniture, assembled Ava's new bed, hung curtains that Margaret had helped pick out. By Sunday evening, the new apartment looked like a home. Not perfect, not magazine-worthy, but clean and comfortable and fundamentally theirs. Ava ran through the rooms with boundless energy, claiming spaces and making plans. her joy infectious and complete. "Daddy, I love it! This is the best house ever!" Ethan hugged her, breathing in strawberry shampoo and childhood happiness. "I'm glad, baby. We deserve a good home." That night, after Ava fell asleep in her new bedroom, Ethan stood on the small balcony and looked out at the neighborhood. Streetlights illuminated quiet streets. Families lived behind lit windows. The whole scene radiating the kind of normalcy he'd been fighting toward for nearly a year. His phone rang. Olivia. "Hey, is this a bad time?" "No, just finished moving into the new place. What's up?" "I wanted to run something by you. The Riverside project is moving into construction phase, and I need someone to serve as our primary liaison with the contractors. It's additional responsibility, additional compensation, and would position you as a project manager rather than just engineering support. Interested?" The opportunity represented another step forward, more recognition of competence beyond technical skills. "Absolutely. What's the timeline?" "We'd transition you over the next month. It means more client interaction, some site visits, coordinating between multiple teams. But I think you're ready, and frankly, I trust your judgment more than anyone else's." "Thank you. I won't let you down." "I know you won't. That's why I'm offering. See you tomorrow, Ethan." After hanging up, Ethan remained on the balcony, processing how fundamentally his life had transformed in less than 4 months. From day laborer to award-winning engineer to project manager. From struggling to survive to building genuine security. From desperation to possibility. The road that had changed everything, that impossible morning when he'd stopped to help a stranger, had led here. Not through straight paths or obvious connections, but through a series of choices and chances that somehow aligned into transformation. February brought new challenges as Ethan assumed project management responsibilities. The work required different skills: diplomacy, coordination, the ability to navigate competing interests, and keep multiple stakeholders aligned. He discovered talents he hadn't known he possessed, found satisfaction in solving human problems rather than just technical ones. The Riverside construction progressed smoothly, Ethan's structural design translating into reality with minimal complications. He conducted weekly site visits, walking through the emerging structure with contractors and architects, making minor adjustments as real-world conditions demanded. During one site visit in early March, standing in what would eventually become the building's lobby, Ethan's phone rang with an unfamiliar number. "This is Ethan Cole." "Mr. Cole, this is Jennifer Warren from the National Engineering Society. I'm calling to inform you that you've been selected as a finalist for our Young Engineer of the Year award based on your work on the Riverside project. Would you be willing to participate in the final evaluation process?" Ethan stood in the construction zone, surrounded by exposed steel and concrete, and felt time compress. 9 months ago, he'd been hauling rebar on sites like this, invisible and exhausted. Now someone was calling to tell him he was being considered for a National Engineering Award. "Yes," he managed. "Absolutely. I'd be honored." The evaluation process consumed the next 6 weeks, submitting additional documentation, participating in panel interviews, preparing presentations about his structural approach and problem-solving methodology. Olivia supported the effort enthusiastically, giving him time and resources to prepare properly. "This is incredible recognition," she said during one of their preparation meetings. "Not just for you, but for Hayes and Associates. We're being noticed at the national level because of your work." It's still surreal. I keep expecting someone to realize there's been a mistake. There's no mistake. You're exceptional at what you do, Ethan. The sooner you accept that, the easier all of this becomes. The award announcement came in late April, delivered via email while Ethan was at his desk reviewing foundation inspections. He read the message 3 times before the words actually penetrated. He'd won. Against candidates from across the country, from larger firms with bigger budgets and more established reputations, Ethan Cole had been named Young Engineer of the Year. He walked to Olivia's office in a daze. She looked up from her computer, immediately reading his expression. "You won." "I won. I don't understand how this is my life." Olivia stood and crossed to him, and for a moment Ethan thought she might hug him. Instead, she extended her hand, professional but warm. "Congratulations. You've earned every bit of this recognition." The formal award ceremony was scheduled for June in Washington, D.C., requiring travel and formal presentations. Ethan would represent not just himself, but Hayes and Associates, showcasing the kind of work the company was capable of producing. That evening, telling Ava about the award, he tried to explain what it meant in terms a 6-year-old could understand. So people think you're really good at building things? Basically, yes. They think the work I did on a big project was some of the best engineering in the whole country. Ava considered this seriously. Are you the best daddy engineer in the whole country? I don't know about that, but I'm pretty good at what I do. I think you're the best engineer and the best daddy. Ethan pulled her close, overwhelmed by the simple faith of children, by Ava's unshakable belief that her father was capable of anything. I love you so much, baby. Everything I do is for you. I know, Daddy, and I'm really proud of you, even though I don't totally understand what engineers do. The months blurred together, successful project completions, additional awards and recognition, Ethan's reputation growing beyond Hayes and Associates into the wider industry. He was invited to speak at conferences, contribute articles to engineering journals, serve on advisory boards for sustainable design initiatives. Through it all, his relationship with Olivia evolved into something neither quite personal nor purely professional, but a hybrid that worked because both of them invested in maintaining appropriate boundaries. They were colleagues who respected each other, a boss and employee who'd become genuine partners in building something meaningful. In early summer, with the Riverside project nearing completion and looking exactly as spectacular as the renderings had promised, Olivia invited Ethan to her office for what she called a strategic conversation. I want to make you a partner, she said without preamble. Not immediately, but within the next 2 years. You've demonstrated exactly the kind of leadership and expertise Hayes and Associates needs as we expand. I want you to have ownership stake, profit sharing, genuine investment in the company's future. The offer was staggering, life-changing in ways that extended far beyond immediate compensation. Olivia, I don't know what to say. Say you'll think about it. Partnership means different responsibilities, longer-term commitment, deeper integration with company strategy. It's not a decision to make lightly. I don't need to think about it. Yes, absolutely yes. She smiled, genuine pleasure crossing her usually controlled expression. Then let's start planning the transition. You've earned this, Ethan? Not because of that morning, not because I feel obligated, but because you've proven yourself repeatedly. You belong here as a partner, helping shape where we go next. That weekend, Ethan took Ava and his mother to dinner at a nice restaurant, the kind of place where they'd never eaten before because the prices seemed designed for different income brackets. He told them about the partnership offer, about the continued transformation of their circumstances. I keep waiting for something to go wrong, he admitted, for this all to collapse and reveal itself as temporary luck rather than sustainable change. Margaret reached across the table, taking his hand. Honey, this isn't luck. This is what happens when talent meets opportunity and hard work. You made choices, good choices, difficult choices, and now you're experiencing the results. Let yourself enjoy it. She's right, Ava added, with the absolute certainty only children possess. You're just really good at your job, Daddy. That's not lucky. That's just true. The award ceremony in Washington, D.C. happened in mid-June, a formal event attended by engineering professionals from across the country. Ethan delivered a presentation about the Riverside project, explaining his structural approach and the innovations that had made the design possible. Standing at the podium, looking out at an audience of peers and mentors and people whose work he'd studied in graduate school, Ethan felt the full weight of how far he'd traveled, not just professionally, but personally, from the desperation of day labor to this moment of recognition, from invisible to celebrated, from barely surviving to genuinely thriving. In the audience, Olivia watched with obvious pride. She'd insisted on attending despite the trip requiring her to reschedule important meetings, wanting to support Ethan during this recognition of his achievements. After the ceremony, at a reception filled with congratulations and networking, Olivia found him. You were brilliant up there, confident, articulate, completely commanding the room. I was terrified the entire time. It didn't show. You represented yourself and Hayes and Associates perfectly. She paused, seeming to choose her next words carefully. Ethan, I want you to know something. That morning, when you stopped to help me, I was having the worst day of my professional life. I just left a disastrous investor meeting, my car broke down, and I felt completely alone and overwhelmed. Then you appeared, this stranger who had no reason to help but chose to anyway. You reminded me that there was still kindness in the world, still people who did the right thing without calculating the cost. I didn't know any of that. I know. That's what made it matter. You helped because help was needed, not because you knew who I was or what I could do for you. She met his eyes directly. I think about that constantly, about the choice you made and what it cost you. And I'm grateful every day that I get to work with someone who has that kind of character alongside your technical brilliance. Olivia, you've given me back my career and my dignity. You've changed my daughter's future and my family's security. Whatever debt you think you owe from that morning, it's been repaid 1,000 times over. There's no debt. There's just gratitude and respect and genuine partnership. That's what I hope we've built. They stood in companionable silence, watching other attendees network and celebrate, two people whose lives had collided improbably and somehow aligned into something meaningful. The flight back to their city felt different than the journey out. Ethan sat in his seat, business class, another small luxury that still felt surreal, and reflected on the impossible journey from that empty road to this moment. He thought about the man he'd been 9 months ago, desperate and struggling, choosing to stop for a stranger despite knowing it might cost him everything. He'd been terrified that day, convinced he was making the stupidest decision of his life. But that choice had revealed something about who he was, or maybe who he wanted to be. Someone who valued compassion over convenience, who saw suffering and responded rather than calculating whether intervention was worth the risk. And somehow, impossibly, that choice had led here, to security and recognition and a future that extended beyond survival into genuine possibility. The pilot announced their descent. Ethan looked out the window at the city spread below, lights beginning to glow in the gathering dusk. Somewhere down there, Ava was waiting with his mother, probably planning elaborate questions about the trip. Somewhere down there was the new apartment, the good job, the life he'd reconstructed from ruins. His phone buzzed with a text from Ava, sent by his mother. "Did you win, Daddy? I know you won. You're the best." Ethan smiled, typing back, "I won, and I can't wait to tell you all about it. Love you more than all the stars." The response came immediately. "Love you more than all the butterflies in the whole world. That's more than stars because butterflies are better." He laughed aloud, drawing curious glances from nearby passengers. His daughter, his anchor, his reason for everything, reducing profound professional achievement to a competition about which metaphor demonstrated greater love. The plane touched down smoothly, and Ethan gathered his belongings, joining the stream of passengers deplaning into the familiar terminal. His mother waited at arrivals with Ava, who broke free and ran toward him at full speed. "Daddy, tell me everything. Was it amazing? Did everyone think you were the best engineer?" He scooped her up, spinning her around despite her getting almost too big for such gestures. "It was pretty amazing, and I'll tell you all about it. But first, what do you say we go get ice cream? The really good kind?" "Yes. Can Grandma come too?" "Absolutely. This is a celebration for all of us." They walked through the terminal together, Margaret smiling with quiet pride, Ava chattering with boundless energy, Ethan carrying his award and his daughter and the profound gratitude of someone who'd been given a second chance and hadn't wasted it. The road that had changed everything continued forward, its path no longer uncertain but filled with possibility. And walking that road, Ethan finally understood that success wasn't measured solely in awards or salaries or professional recognition. Success was measured in the ability to choose compassion when it mattered most, to maintain integrity under pressure, to build a life that balanced excellence with presence, achievement with humanity. Success was his daughter's laughter, his mother's pride, the knowledge that he'd faced impossible choices and emerged not just intact but transformed. Success was looking back at that desperate morning 9 months ago and knowing that despite everything it had cost, despite the fear and uncertainty, he would make the exact same choice again. Because some decisions weren't about calculations or consequences. Some decisions were about who you were and who you wanted to become. And Ethan Cole, standing in an airport terminal with his family, holding an award that represented the culmination of impossible journeys, knew exactly who he'd become. Someone his daughter could be proud of. Someone who'd rebuilt his life brick by brick through talent and determination and grace. Someone who'd learned that kindness wasn't weakness and compassion wasn't foolishness, but the foundation upon which everything else could be built. The automatic doors opened to the evening air, warm and promising, and Ethan walked through them toward whatever came next, carrying the weight of the past and the hope of the future in equal measure. Finally understanding that both were necessary, both were valuable, and both had led him exactly where he needed to be. Home.